Thank you.
Good evening. I will call to order the City Council Special Budget Study Session for April 21st, 2014. Could I have a roll call, Ms. Fitton?
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick? Here. Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
Councilmember Teese?
Here.
All present. We have one discussion item this evening. It is the proposed fiscal year 2014-2015 annual budget and three-year budget. I know there's a lot of hard work that went into this, and thanks to City Manager Kishnick and your staff, and I will turn the meeting over to you this evening.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm pleased to see everybody from staff and from the public who are here in the council to talk about $151 million total budget for the City of Troy for the next fiscal year, 14-15, which we'll just call fiscal year 15 for here forward to keep it simple. But before we talk about 2015 and the budget of $151 million, something just popped up, Troy Roads Rock, and TroyRoadsRock.com, because I know Mr. Van Det is here somewhere, and he's pleased to announce that tomorrow they will start saw cutting on Long Lake.
Yeah, that's correct.
Steve, do you want to say something?
7 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're placing the barricades out, and then they'll be working on the westbound side, east of Rochester Road, and they'll be saw cutting the right lane all the way down to Livernois Road. Won't do all that tomorrow, but that's what they're going to start.
Well, they'll be done by the end of the week. But go to Troy Roads Rock, which is why I give that little piece of misinformation. Hopefully everyone understands that's getting TroyRoadsRock.com, and that's where you can keep track of everything that's going on as the construction season commences. And Kurt Bovenseep and Alex from the IT department have collaborated with a few others, Cindy and Andrew, to put this logo together and to begin what will be a significant investment in our infrastructure, which we've talked about enough. So now we want to talk about the budget, and I thought tonight I would give you what we're going to do on Monday and on Wednesday, and then get right into the presentations. And tonight I'll give a brief overview of the budget and the major changes, talk about the management letter that I've laid out, to talk about the process that we've gone through to get to this point and the teamwork that's gone into it. And it's just not myself, it's just not Mr. Darling, it's not the mayor, it's, we've all been in this and going through study sessions and retreats and public forums to come to this point. So it is a work in progress, and we'll talk about that. And we'll actually indulge in a lot of that progress. We'll talk about some taxable values and millages and building activities, summarize the general fund, and then we'll go through the major departmental, the departmental changes that are major in stature. So we won't have a presentation by every department like we did last year, just the areas where you see major budget changes or requests, to highlight those areas and to give the rationale behind that and the cost of what's going on. And we'll end tonight with the nonprofit presentations from the Troy Historic Society, Nature Society, Community Coalition, and Troy Youth Assistance. That logo, I think, is going to stay there all night. But on Wednesday, we will have a capital presentation. And then what I've tried to do is format this a little differently, where on Wednesday, we can spend our evening, because capital we've done a lot of already. So it'll be a very small presentation on capital this year. But issues, let's talk about the issues. Let's spend some time while we're talking about the budget on the issues. And the first thing we'll talk about is what new positions have been requested in this budget. And why should we request new positions when we have a hard time filling with bodies, and there's a gap there. We'll also look at health insurance and how do we do health insurance in Troy. And what we're learning is 95% of the people, I think, don't understand how we do health insurance in Troy. We want everyone to go to the community blue plan. We use the illustrative rates for the Community Blue Plan, but we're actually self-funded, so it's based on actual experience. But the other two plans, it's not like that, it's a premium-based. So when we budget about $5 million for health insurance across all funds, you know, we spend about 3.5, 3.9, and the better the programs that people like Jeanette and HR do for employee wellness, if they're in the Community Blue Plan, we benefit from that experience. And so that's why it's so important. It's not just what's the cost, it's how is the connection made to employee wellness and healthy employees, and how do we save money that way. So health insurance will be one of the topics. Troy Public Library, we want to talk about the Troy Public Library. We want to talk about all the things that are happening there. We also want to talk about the future. We want to establish, like I said in my memo and the previous emails, we'll go through this as a continuation with a little technology flavor, but we'll develop study sessions in the fall of 2014. I know one piece of my letter for the real critical reader saw 2015. But it's 2014 this fall where we will be discussing a single issue of the library. Golf course status, this has been a particularly harsh winter on the golf course, and we don't get to hear from Don Tiller. During this budget process, we thought we'd bring in the golf course management team of Billy Casper and have them be part of the budget process so they can give the input in terms of what's happening out there and what affects them and what the impact of this winter was and how we are going to have to address that going forward. Detroit water and sewer status. Tonight we're going to have a presentation from Public Works. We'll look at sewer water and we'll look at rates. We'll look at our rates because of the water rates from the city of Detroit. And we'll look at the cost. We'll look at the fund equity position, the cash position in the sewer water funds. What we're reserving Wednesday night to talk about, as Council Member Fleming has continually mentioned, the Detroit water and sewer status and what the authority potentially looks like, what the status of those negotiations that Tim, Richneck, and Rick have been involved in, and where that possibly is going. So we've reserved that for a single issue on Wednesday night. And then I hear a lot, what is our marketing strategy for the city of Troy? How are we getting the word out there? How are we branding? How are we communicating the why in the city of Troy? And I know that's near and dear to everyone's heart, the why of the city of Troy. So not Detroit, but the city of Troy. So then we'll do an all-fun summary and then a wrap-up with sort of a discussion on some of the decision points that we need to go over. So with that, I want to go through the letter, and I really want to show this book. And I know most of you have spent the whole weekend reviewing this since it went out probably Friday, if not late Thursday night when they finished it. But so many staff have worked on this, including everyone you see here. Tom and Brenda's here somewhere, Brenda Carter, who's in our office, and Beth Pashnick, who've done a great job working till all hours of the night with Tom to make this a reality. But when you look at this, it's not just an award-winning budget. It is an award-winning budget, but it is extremely resourceful. And if you go from the front cover to the back cover, you'll find how resourceful it is. So I want to just walk you through it in the next 7 minutes. And then Nino's going to give me the hook and go through the resources of this. So if you start the page numbers, page 4, which is my letter, you'll see we talk about the city's millage rates in comparison with everyone else in terms of where we've been. You've heard that story. I'm not going to go over it tonight. We talked about the Troy story and where we are. You can see that in these little sticky note headings. How important the AAA bond rating is. We did the city council did joint meetings with DDA, Planning Commission, and the school district to show our working together. That's page 6. And now where the page numbers are really small in the bottom middle on one of the sticky notes. We conducted the public forums, which you can see the results behind you in terms of the focus group scenarios. Then we went on the retreat, which is page 7. And I know the much anticipated, waited for why statement, which is found on page 7 of the letter at the top right. And the why statement is, we believe a strong community embraces diversity, promotes innovation, and encourages collaboration. We strive to lead by example within the region. We do this because we want everyone to choose Troy as their community for life. We believe in doing government the best. Some want it to be differently. We're making a decision at this point. We're going with the best. And everyone can debate it later on. The strategies are also there, which are, sort of the guiding pieces that I won't read to you, but these are the things that we take into consideration when we've surveyed and talked to everybody in their focus groups, and what are the most important areas to focus on. Then you go to page 8, in the top left, it starts with budget changes. And you can see, Nino's going to talk about this in a little bit. This is the first opportunity where we've actually experienced a total taxable value increase in the last several years of 1.42%. So that's good, but if you look at that percentage, it's not very substantial. So remember, when you have a taxable value cap because of Proposal A, when you have a millage cap that's charter required, you're primarily built out. The budget is not the easiest thing to bring everybody's diverse interests and needs together, let alone wants for quality of life and a high standard of living that people in Troy are used to with services. So remember those variables and those components, that the taxable value cap because of Proposal A, the millage cap because of the charter, and then how much land is actually able to be built on in Troy. And as you all know, it's the most difficult land anyway. And that doesn't drive everyone's decision. We continue to see that tax yields, property taxes, it guides everyone's decision for development. That's not the case, because you just can't move the needle on a $4 billion taxable value very quickly, very substantially, if you will. Each small development is great in total, but it just doesn't move the needle on $4 billion. Okay? So what did we do? We have because of the millage cap, it's set at 10.50, but that is a reduction because the one millage rate that we are able to affect, which is the refuse fund millage rate. Remember last year we increased it from 1.5 to 1.9 because we had about, and we'll get to these numbers, about 59,000 I think was the number, $59,000 in fund balance, which wasn't very substantial. And so we raised it to 1.09. We looked at that, and I don't know if it's about 500,000 and 600,000 in fund balance now after 1 year because of the taxable value increases that we didn't expect. So we looked at that, and we said, you know what? It was right to increase it last year. We stand by that decision, at least a recommendation. And now, because of the revenues that have flowed in, we think it's wise and prudent to rebalance, like we've said all along, and reduce that to 1.07 from 1.09. So from 10.52 to 10.50. It's not the substantialness of the number. It's the direction, it's the evaluation, it's the analysis, and the willingness to look at it and present what's actually happening and what's right. So that's why you see a reduction in our millage rate in an already low millage rate environment relative to our neighbors, for sure. And I think that's been demonstrated, A, over the years, and B, even of late. So what kind of right sizing and rebalancing is included in here? You're going to hear a lot of this tonight. You'll see 6 full-time positions, and that's 2 police officers and a public service aide that you'll hear about. 3 part-time positions that will also be talked about in the police department. It's from full-time or part-time to full-time, the emergency operations planner. Information technology has some, working with the library to enhance the technology field there and advance technology. Human resources, we are fully, this was a conversation of last year, remember, we wanted to be fully staffed in the HR so that when we have these positions, even existing positions, we have the team that's in place to get it out, get it going, not sit on somebody's desk because nobody's at that desk anymore, and get it filled. And that's what Jeanette and her staff are doing. So that's reflected in the numbers this year. Also, you'll hear Kurt talk about Bovenseat and Tim Richnett talk about 2 positions for our roads, labor positions, and then some increases due to elections you'll hear talk about. We did hear the request from Troy Youth Assistance and put that in the budget in the amount of $10,000, and Troy Community Coalition in the amount of $25,000. We know that money doesn't solve all the problems, but we heard that as a need, and we see the value of that from the police department perspective, which will be discussed by the police chief and team tonight, and we believe it to be prudent to put it in there. We will, as I talked about on page 10 now, the library we will be talking about during this budget process, but then as we go forward into the fall 2014. Transit Center I also discussed in terms of what's happening with that, and that is the condemnation has been authorized and the appraisals are ongoing, and that's really all that we're able to say about this in this budget at this point, and I think everyone's well versed on that subject. I also gave some legislative impacts, which are the main ones that I won't discuss tonight, but retroactive pay being the one, personal property tax being another, which is a vote this August, which will impact the city, and the WPW fix, which is a clear, is my time up?
Long 3 minutes.
I said 7. Anyway, so the WPW fix, which was a City of Troy case originally, is being talked about. So I want to take you, just to wrap up, I really would like to take you to a few pages. Page 20 of this document. If you go to page 20 in the top left, you see the written reserve policy that the City of Troy City Council adopted, where it talks about city policy calling for a range of general fund, unassigned fund balance between 20 to 30%. And then a financial plan will be required in the next budget cycle as part of that, which, you know, we summarized it here. But it is in your budget document now, which was sort of the confusion before. Where was it? It was different in 2 different places. It has been codified, if you will, and it's very critical that we understand that and see it in print. I want to take you to page 24, which I think is very telling. Page 24 is maybe one of those pages that you never talk about very much, but if you look at the bottom, and you look at what look at the middle, the average residential taxable value in 07-08 is $124,597, right? And then the proposed, it's 102,190. So what happened was the crash hit, values, bottom fell out, and the values went down. Assessed values lower than taxable, so taxable value was reduced. So what you can see here is the value going down and now starting to go up just slightly because it's rebounding. But if you look at the bottom, how much did you pay in City of Troy taxes back in 07-08? $1,156. And proposed, $1,073. It bears mention, ladies and gentlemen, that with the millage increase due to the library, dedicated millage, in 2010 to 2011 to 11-12, the 963 to 986, right? Those are dollar amounts, they're not millages. If you look at the top, the millages correspond. But you pay less today than you paid in 07-08. Okay, I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but that's a really key chart, and that's with the increase of the millage for the library. Okay, that's all taken into consideration. So please understand, it's a low tax rate community, and it bears mentioning. Where do you pay less today than you did in 07-08? I wanted to show you the new position summary on page 63, and just in summation form, because my time is up. The bottom is where we show human resources. We eliminated a part-time and added a full-time. That was really last year. It's showing up in the numbers now. Police added 2 full-time police officers and 1 police service aide, and then added from part-time to full-time 1 emergency planning coordinator. Public Works added 2 full-time equipment operators, and information technology are adding 1 full-time help desk technician dedicated solely to library and 1 full-time application specialist from the elimination of part-time, and that's a contractual position, correct?
Yes.
So that is the summary I wanted to point out, 4 positions that you'll hear more about tonight. I can take you to page 67 and show you, page 67, 2015, at the bottom of 67. Page numbers on bottom right. See, I like it when people are going through the book. It just makes me feel a lot better than looking at a PowerPoint, because this is where the rubber hits the road. 33 million beginning, 27 million ending, so use of fund balance is 5.597. Of that, 4.3 million is for streets, and this year, and fire station 4, and that's over 2 years, both of them. So you can see, when you take that out, it's about $1.2 million is what we would be recommending use of fund, unassigned fund balance for this budget, okay? We also understand that through health insurance, through attrition, we feel that that is a good number, without putting a vacancy factor in there, to feel comfortable with that we will end up in a positive light at the end of the year, without being over a substantially greater surplus to push us over the 30% over time. Because if you look 2014 estimated, we budgeted 2.065 use. We're estimating 1.9, and we know probably at the end of that, you know, where that will be probably on the positive side. So, you know, Councilmember Teets, I remember him asking, when are we going to budget this thing right? And so I want to point all that out, because that goes into our discussion when we're trying to figure out what's the right number. Okay? So that's my intro for this, and I will now move on to Dino and Tom. Any questions on that first part, though? And if you have typos or changes, we are accepting them on a wholesale basis tomorrow morning. Because there have been some changes that we need to do. Any questions?
Any questions? Please ask them now.
All right, taxable value and millage summary.
Well, Brian, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Brian pretty much covered all this for you already. In the interest of speed, they cut me down from 12 slides to 10, so I won't be up here very long. The good news is that it's good news. We have a net increase in taxable value, first time probably in about 5 years, by 1.42%. The way that broke down was the residential market exploded. There's no other way to say it. You can't read a newspaper, look at television, and not see that. On a 2-year sales study, it was over 11% the increase. Unfortunately, the CPI was 1.6%, so that's what your taxable value was allowed to go up. We did pick up some money on transfers of ownerships where they were uncapped. So the residential component and your average taxable value went up about 2.8%. You have to temper that with a slight decrease in the commercial industrial market yet. That's how you end up with a net of 1.42. That whole mess, you lost a little bit in commercial and in industrial. You picked up a lot in residential. Personal property law was also up a little bit this year, which was a surprise to us. But they're filling up the office buildings, and those people are bringing property with them. So that's technically free money to us, because I don't get to pick up anything on the real property for that, but the personal property we get. So there's an increase in personal property also. So basically a 3% increase in residential and a 1.42 for the overall for the city. And I think we threw another slide in here. This is something for you to read later on, but this will give you a breakdown by class, how the changes have been. We went back to 2006, that was one of our peak years, so you can see the differences that we had. This is actually on 2 slides. Yeah, here we go. So it covers everything, residential, commercial, industrial, personal property. You can see by class and by year what the increase was. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And I'm going to turn it over to Tom Ray. Thank you very much. Oh, if you have any questions?
Thank you, Nino.
I have a question,
Sure.
Mayor. The commercial industrial, you know, I mean, we've seen residential rebound and so forth. What are you thinking with commercial?
I should have actually said that, and I'm sorry I forgot that part of my presentation. Within the next year, it'll flatten out, and within the next 2 or 3 years, we're gonna actually start picking up some taxable value. That's our projection. And that'll be huge at that point when you can collect on the entire roll, because right now, you're only collecting on 60% of it. Realistically, you're losing money on the other 40% of the roll. But we see that flattening out in the next year, and in the next 2 years, we should be picking up taxable value on those classes.
Good.
Thank you.
Kind of shows down in, whoops, down in here, it's just starting to flatten out.
Just flatten out. So we are going to, after that, 16, 17, we expect it to.
It should hit the bottom around 17, 18, and then start to pick up from there. Okay, thank you, Nino. So now Nino has done his job and did his assessed value and the taxable value. The next part then is looking at the millage rate. According to Nino, the average taxable value for our residents is about $102,190. And if we apply the millage rates, which we can see here, we're proposing, again, as Brian said, a reduction from 10.52 in the 2014 year to 10.5 for 2015. Again, the reduction is in the refuge fund. It should be noted that our overall millage rate that by charter for both the general and the capital fund can't be more than 8.1 mils. We're proposing an 8.07 total millage rate, so we're below that cap based on the charter. Should be noted also that our debt and library are remaining unchanged at 0.7 mils. If we apply this millage then to what Nino said, the average taxable value of our homes, again, is about $102,000. We come up with an average tax bill of $1,073 for our average city resident. That can be broken down between what is in the general fund of $664, what goes to capital of $156, our refuge $109, and again, both the library and the debt would be about $72 each. So that's how that breaks down. Should also note, though, that although our millage went down, the average prior year, if you can see for this year, that adds up to $1,043. So the actual tax capture went up $30, even though the millage went down by 2 mils. And that reason is totally, again, in the assessed value, the taxable value of the homes going up again. You know, that was, the total was 2.8%, but what's realized was about 2.4%, that $30 difference between 14 and 15 for the average homeowner.
You can see that on page 24 that we were just at, that whole chart, page 24, not of the handout, but of the budget book.
That's all I have on that. Any questions then on taxable value or the millage rates?
Questions for Tom?
Thank you, Tom.
Mayor and Council, I'm next, and I'm going to give a short introduction. So Nino kind of told a story about how the valuations are going up, but combined with that, we're seeing very good positive economic indicators. And one of the most important ones, I would say, we have statistics from CBRE, and they're saying that our office vacancy rate is approximately 24% from the fourth quarter of last year. You compare that to 2010 fourth quarter, that was over 29% vacancies. And these numbers do not include the Kmart headquarters. It's not in those totals. The same figure currently for industrial, 6.2%, and 2010 it was almost 16%. So you see in the past 5 years there's been a lot of absorption. And what we're seeing also is buildings that were sitting vacant, especially industrial ones, which are being looked at and being filled every day. Glenn Lapin's meeting with people, and we're seeing just a lot of activity. And I think that's just going to continue. With that, I want to take the opportunity to introduce Paul Featherstone. Paul is the new Safe Built building official. Safe Built Steve Burns moved up in the corporation as a regional representative now, correct, Paul?
That's correct.
Yeah, and So Paul is going to make a presentation of building indicators.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, distinguished guests. Take just a moment of your time to speak about building valuations. We ran the numbers back from 2010, where building valuations were just over $30 million, okay? In 2011, they rose to $95 million. 2012, up to $136 million. Now, 2013, again, $136 million, but $415,000 wasn't a huge jump, but it was still right on line with what we were thinking, okay? And now, 2014, currently, we're at just over $35 million. Okay? Due to very harsh winter, we're getting ready to explode. And I'll also show you that on the inspection numbers on the next slide.
Paul, could you tell us what these
Sure can.
building valuations are?
Yeah, building valuations, basically when a business or a homeowner or a builder comes in and states that they're going to build a house or a business for this amount of money, it's gonna cost this much money. So we will actually run those numbers to make sure it does compare to the International Code Council numbers of what it should be per square footage. So say a house comes in at 250,000 square foot, we will check it, or $250,000, we'll check it against our charge, and it could raise up to $300,000. That would be the building valuation, would be the $300,000. Or a theater or something over 2.5 million, something like that, that would be the building valuation. And also for 2014, we're projecting a 3% rise of $138,543,000. Now, on building inspections, of course, when valuations are down, inspections are down. But as you can see, they're going to be rising. 2010, we only had 3,316 building inspections, a very low number. But 2011, you see they doubled, over 6,000. 2012, again, up near 9,000, 8,867. 2013, again, wasn't a big jump in valuation in that year, but it also did jump up in inspections of over 9,000, close to 10,000 inspections. Right now, we're at 1,701 inspections. It seems like, again, a very low number. All the builders, everybody's waiting for the frost laws to come off. As soon as they do, we're going to absolutely explode. And we're definitely up to the task on that with the inspections. 2014, we're projected again, 3%, we're looking over 10,266 building inspections for the year. Do you have any questions?
Questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's good news, there's not very many questions.
These numbers.
Great. I'm going to take you quickly through a general fund summary. I'll really talk a little bit about revenues and then just kind of a cursory review over some of the expenditures, because we have our department heads that will go in more detail about some of the department expenditures. So let's go ahead and start with general fund revenues. Total general fund revenues for 2015 is budgeted at $53.89 million. It should be noted, our three primary funding factors, again, are taxes at 55% or $29.84 million. The next would be for our charges for services, which accounts for about 14.76% or about $7.95 million. And finally, our state shared revenues account for about 12.48%. or about 6.7 million. So I'm going to concentrate on those three because inside those, that's 80% of our revenues and other sources. So let's go ahead and talk about property taxes. Again, 16 and 17 show a slight increase of about 1.4% as we move out. Due to basically valuation increases. Again, we're projecting that our millage rates stay the same. Yes, they are. Next, let's talk about charges for services. Again, our charges for services are about $7.95 million. Of that, there's really two major factors that account for that, and that's services rendered and use and administrative fees. It should be noted that these account for about $3 million of revenue each. One of the major factors in these services for rendered is Services rendered for engineering fees of around $2 million. This is expected to be up about $600,000 or 43% from the prior year, from 2014. The other part is the use and admin fees. Again, one of the big players in that is your community center passes, which are expected to increase about $1.5 million or about 10%. Finally, state shared revenue accounted again for about 12.48% of our total general fund budget. It's an increase in 2015 around $356,000 or about 5% right in here. Although you can see that we've been trending up lately in state shared revenue, it should be noted that we're still well below the 2001 levels of around 8 million. So you don't see that out here, but those would be around 8 million. So, but at least we've kind of hit the bottom, looks like, and starting to trend upwards, and that's good news. Let's talk about expenditures, and again, real quickly, as a kind of a cursory summary. Total expenditures are $59.5 million. You can see the major expenditures, the way that we allocate our services, is in public safety. And public safety accounts for about 52% of our total expenditures, or about $31 million in there. Finally, we have our sections of general government. Again, that accounts for a lot of the city manager, the council, some of our general operations there. One note here is that elections, part of why this is going up is we have election costs that went up about $79,000, and Elaine Bittner will talk a little bit more about that on her turn. Public safety, again, this is our largest operating expense. One of the things that should be noted in the police department is that we did, as Brian alluded to, we did put a budget in there for the Troy Youth Assistance for $10,000, and the Troy Community Coalition for another $25,000, which will be included in that. And again, the police department will give you a more in-depth understanding of what's going on with that. Streets department, again, streets department's up about 8.5%, primarily for local streets, snow and ice removal. And Kurt will talk a little bit about that, along with 2 additional positions that were being budgeted in that department.
Let's go back there real quick.
Yep.
Just a little side note for Kurt and Tim. They did not go over their budget this year with this winter. And his budget, the budget for the streets, assumes a cost that would be the same as this year with a little increase. So in order to hit those numbers in snow and ice removal, we would have to have as bad as this winter next year as we did this year. So the numbers are very solid, but they represent the costs that were this year. Just so everybody's clear on that.
Next, our community and economic development section, which includes engineering and planning. One thing to note here is that our engineering and other services, our engineering department went up about 20%. One of the major things for that, and again, they'll be talking about that. Mr. Hooter and Mr. Van Dett will be talking about engineering here in a minute, but one of their major things is an increase of around $325,000 for contractual services for engineering and road inspections, which we know we're making a major road improvement project. Recreation and culture, couple things to note in here is the way the budget that you have in front of you right now, the historic village, let's start with the nature center, has a subsidy budget in it for $50,000, included for 15, 16, and 17. Our building and grounds is our normal cost because we are responsible for the building and grounds for the nature center. The historic village has a subsidy in it only for 2015 as it stands right now for $75,000. We have not budgeted that for 16 or 17, but probably a point of discussion as we go forward. The building and grounds, again, are a responsibility, and they're staying around the $75,000 to $80,000 mark as we go forward through 2017. Finally, the last major category in the general fund are transfers, and transfers to capital. And again, we've talked about this. Our major project for 15 is our capital for the enhanced street project and half of the fire station project. Again, in 16, you can see this is the other half of the fire station project, and can kind of continuing some contributions to keep our streets moving in the right direction. Finally, to summarize this, we've seen that we had revenues and other sources of 53.8 million we talked about. We talked about expenditures and other sources of 59.4 million. So that accounts then for a total use of fund balance of around was it 5.3 million. Of that 5.6 million. Of that, 4.3 million was for those transfers out to capital. So we're moving then at the end of 2015, we're expecting total fund balance to be around going from 33.3 to 27.7 million. Of that, unassigned fund balance then is expected to be around the $15.3 million mark, or around 27.8% of our budgeted annual expenditures. Any questions on the general fund summary?
Questions for Tom? And like you indicated, there will be a presentation individually for most of those departments that were asked.
That was just the macro view there.
Councilwoman Holder.
The state shared revenue, are we getting indications from Lansing on these numbers? Is this a best, how are you forecasting that?
They have a website. The Department of Treasury has a website, and you can look at, based on their conferences, committee conferences, what they project.
Okay.
Actually, they show actuals and they show projections, and so that's what we use for our budget. And, in this climate, they'll be closer to right on. 5 years ago, they were dropping way off, and that's the great heist that the MML was talking about, the $2 million a year, rough numbers. But they have a website that they update on a regular basis.
Okay.
The last one, what 15 is, you can see we're keeping it flat in 16 and 17 to be conservative.
Okay.
But for all practical purposes, it'll probably go up.
Okay. That's what I was
But
wondering.
they will update every 6 months. It's a big number in the general fund revenues.
Still not the amount of money we're supposed to get.
$2 million a year over 10 years is 20 million, right? And that's the number that was floated around. I know some people were emailing me, is that accurate? I said, how do you know what's accurate? You don't know what was going to be, but if you just take what you were getting and just flatline it over 10 years, it's pretty simple math.
Pretty simple math. Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to do a brief overview of the police department budget. Once again, we're trying to make our theme boots in the ground. We are a people-oriented business. It takes people to do this job, so we want to make sure we're focusing on the people that are needed. We wanted to illustrate here that we've increased some of the other duties that are done within the police department to free up police officers to be on the road providing police service. So we've been increasing our number of online reports. While the number itself, 411, doesn't seem that large, we're going in the right direction with this, and we're going to keep trying to get that to increase for people to make online reports. Those all represent time that police officers can be out doing other things. Desk reports by part-time desk attendants have increased. We're going in the right direction on that. That's a very efficient move we're making. And that's reflected in what you see here is the change in workload per sworn officer. When you look at the calls for service, our police officers are handling 29% more calls for service per police officer. Our arrests are up 45% per police officer. Our OWI arrests, which are reflected in those arrests as drunk driving, are up 45% per police officer. At the same time, the number of requests for ambulances that officers go on has decreased by 33%. So that means if an officer isn't needed at a request for ambulance, they are not dispatched and they're able to do other duties. Again, sticking to our theme of boots on the ground, this is illustrating our council authorized number of police officers, that's sworn personnel that we have. The intent here, not to get into too much detail, is just to show the innovation we're doing by using data and crime mapping through the Crime View dashboard. This is available to officers, and we're moving in this direction more and more to utilize this data. And this is relatively new for us. We've really embraced and been embraced by the volunteers within the police department. And these are people that have come forward to help us to get the job done. We've got citizens on patrol, and you can see their hours keep going up. And when you look at the citizens on patrol for more than 2,100 hours of service they've given, and internal volunteers, we're up to 900 hours. This is equivalent of about 1.5 full-time employees that we've got volunteers that are helping us out. So we're making all the efforts to keep the police officers and our employees doing other duties that are more responsible that only sworn police officers can do. What we wanted to illustrate here is all the partners that we have that help us get the law enforcement job done. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. But what you should see here is the theme is from the federal level down to the county, the state, the local level, and our private partnerships. We partner with a lot of people, and we get the job done. This is also more efficient. It's just a better way of doing business. That's one of our themes, is to partner with the community we serve. And by all these people working together, we're able to get the job done for the citizens of Troy. Now, we're going to get in a lot more detail on these next two slides, which are Troy Youth Assistance and Troy Community Coalition later on, so I'm not going to go through all these points. Just want to point out that these are two groups that we work with in partnership. The Troy Youth Assistance, it's very important to note that we divert 40 juvenile cases annually to them. Now, that's time that police officers would be handling these cases in investigation and through the criminal justice system. And most importantly is we're taking those kids and stopping them from having to go in the criminal justice system and be branded and have records. And it allows them to become more productive members of society by working with Troy Youth Assistance. We'll get into more detail with that later. Also with the Troy Community Coalition, the coalition is a group I've been involved with for about 20 years now, and that's a multiple community sectors working together to reduce alcohol, tobacco, and other dangerous drug use. And again, we'll get into this more later on in more detail. Just want to make sure you see that on our slides. This illustrates our staffing levels over the past 4 years. You can see in 11-12 we had our high of 123 for this 4-year period. We went down and we've been steadily increasing as our productivity's gone up, as our need for more officers to get service back in there. And as you can see, we're going from 90, we're requesting from 99 this year to 101 sworn personnel. We'll get into more detail of that when Captain Revin explains what we're looking at. Lieutenant Gordon is going to explain the staffing dilemma slide we have here.
Good evening. This slide is going to kind of help visualize where we're at as far as total sworn officers that have been authorized by council for a budget, as well as where we're at with the number of bodies we actually have on staff. The blue line that's running east to west here represents where we should be at, and the red line kind of goes up and down as we have separations, retirements, and hires. Shows where we're at with our actual numbers. I think we're going to talk on Wednesday about some specifics as to how we can close this gap, but we just kind of want to give you a little indication of where we're at as far as the numbers. Next slide. This one gives a little more detail. If you can bear with the funky colors here, we've got the blue line, the bar going up and down, represents police officers that we've hired during an individual quarter of a year. The yellow represents separations, and the red are retirements. So as an example, in the first quarter of 2013, we hired 2 cops, but we lost 4 to retirement and separation. The next 2 quarters, we hired 4, lost 4, and then that repeated itself right back here. And as to further illustrate this, we just lost another 2 officers last week, 1 to retirement and 1 to a separation. Is there any questions about this slide here? Okay.
This is our non-sworn, which are the uniformed civilians. That's our police service aides that work in lockup and communications, and our civilian slide. Now, in this slide here, things pretty much remain the same. With the exception of our civilian, we're looking to take a part-time position from our emergency planning and turn that into a full-time position, which is a yield of 1. And our police service aides, we'll get into more detail later, we want to add 1 there. So we'll get into more detail and explain this a little bit later on in our presentation. So one of my favorite slides. This shows the increase as the staffing services and the needs in the city increased over the years, and then the decrease to where we are today in our sworn and non-sworn personnel. The non-sworn has remained pretty consistent here. We have a good bang for the buck with the non-sworn personnel. Lieutenant Gordon will explain this.
One of the partnerships that we're very proud to be a part of is with OTAC, the Oakland County Tactical Training Consortium. It's a training group that's composed of 27 police agencies from throughout the county. The population we serve represents about 95% of the county population. Just an example of one of the training initiatives we did recently this past summer is we were able to train from all 27 agencies about 950 officers on how to respond to active shooter incidents at our schools, at our places of worship, and at our businesses, so that we can all respond in a similar manner.
Good evening. The question basically is why we're requesting 2 new officers, and this is the reason. People want safe streets. A third of our time is tied up on calls for service that are directly related to traffic, whether it be the crashes, traffic stops, or traffic complaints from citizens. You can see from 2012 to 2013, traffic crashes were up 14%. They continue to go up, especially the first quarter of this year. Police officers are best suited to determine how to prevent traffic crashes and crime and to go out and do that kind of job for it. Those same officers provide expertise in major crash investigations that we conduct with assistance to the other departments that we belong to. What we intend to use these officers for is this program we were looking into before, the DDAC program, is data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety. You can see it's supported by the federal government, NIJ, NISTA, and the Bureau of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Assistance. You can see what the data kind of reflects. This bottom chart would show the high crash traffic intersections that correlate with high crime in the area, high crime numbers. It breaks it down to the times of day, days of week, so it shows us where we need to put those resources that you give us, where we best can utilize them to help reduce the crime and help reduce the crash rate. They'll be trained in how to do it, they'll be into place at the right times, and do it. 2 police officers, cars and equipment for them to be out there on the road every day. There's a cost associated with that right there. It's a very good value for the money.
One of the most important functions that the police department shares with the fire department is in our emergency operations plan and making sure that it's up to date and maintained throughout the year. By being able to locate and recruit and actually hire on a part-time basis our emergency operations planner, I believe some of you met Kristen over the last couple of weeks, we can ensure that this plan is going to be kept up to date, that it's going to be ready to be implemented should there be some sort of man-made or natural disaster or anything along that lines, as well as be able to serve as a resource to any of the department heads in making sure that their buildings and apartments are up to speed on what they need to do in case of a critical incident. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, we were able to identify, recruit, and actually hire away from Oakland County Homeland Security Kristen. She's received a lot of the basic training that she needs to step right into this position on July 1st, and she's currently going through the State of Michigan Professional Emergency Management Training Program right now.
We discussed before the benefits of having a police service aide on the road. We've been able to get 1 back on the road out of our current budget. When you look at the calls for service, the typical calls for service that a police service aide can handle, it works out to be about 13% of our typical calls for service over any given year. So you're looking at 13% of time that a police officer spends on calls for service that we could have a civilian employee handling. So what we're looking to do is to go back to what we've done in the past and leverage and work very well at, and that is put civilian employees in uniform in appropriately marked vehicles on the road to handle the calls for service that are listed here, in addition to assisting officers with impounds and taking up a lot of things that cause a lot of police officer time, again, to free up officers to do other duties. The best illustration for the cost effectiveness of this is when we look at the total pay and benefits for a police service aide is around $75,000 for everything, and for a police officer, the total pay is about pay and benefits is about $113,000. If you add on to that the time that we have to train the police officer versus training of a police service aide, and time that officers have to go back through and be retrained in things like firearm proficiency and use of force, this is a much better use of time, use of police service aides in that. This is to illustrate the difference between the last year's 14 operating budget and the current budget that we're looking at, the 15 operating budget. And the main point to this is that we consistently remain in the 85% range of our people costs of what the police department budget are. So if you go back over the years, it's been 85%. You can see we're consistently remaining in that. It's not my intent to go through all these other parts here, it's just the main percentage there so you can see it. Now, this is getting into the more detail for what we're looking for in our increases in the current budget over last year's budget. Is personal services are gonna go, we have a cost of about $419,000, and that's for 2 crash prevention specialists that'll be sworn police officers to transition from half-time, a part-time emergency operations planner to a full-time emergency operations planner. So it's not really a full position, it's a part-time position to a full-time position, and the 1 police service aide. Our supplies, there's an increase in our supplies when you look at it, but there's also a corresponding deduction in our capital budget because we've changed the amount of money we put into capital and put some of the things that used to be in capital as recurring expenses in the supplies because they're more expendable items like tasers and things like that. They have a lifespan to them. And our other services charges actually went down in totality. Now, there's 4 items here that we listed that went up, but then there's an overall decrease in our liability deductible. And that came about from a meeting with Mr. Darling and Mr. Kishnick. We looked at, and they pointed out that there's also a liability deductible in another part of the budget. So we were effectively having it appear in 2 parts of the budget, and they didn't feel that was efficient to do that, so we removed it from the police department budget. As you can see, our total increase is 1.1%. Very low increase in our overall budget.
Good evening. The revenue, all the different things that we get money that come into the police department. Some of the things you see there, the 302 and the 911, those are both state training funds that we get for sending our officers and our dispatchers to training. The liquor license is what when we inspect and enforce liquor licensing money we get from the state. And then you go down to the charges for services. We have a contract with Clausen. They supply we supply their dispatch, and they use our jail, and we have a contract with them. The Somerset officer, we have an officer who's at Somerset all the time. They pay 100% of that officer's salary. And then we work the malls. You see us there at Christmas time. The malls actually pay for all the overtime the officers when they're spending time at the mall around Christmas time. And then the fines and fees, all the revenue that we get from anything that's written under city ordinance, we get reimbursements for that. And also the false alarms that anytime you go over 3 false alarms, we start charging them the business or the homes. And then also the towing fees. We actually, when we tow the vehicles, there is a fee that's charged for that.
Maybe another source of revenue for the police department is derived from criminal and drug forfeitures. Those are both at the federal and the state level. We've seen a gradual, I want to say, decline or decrease in those over the last few years. I'm actually pleased to say that it's now leveling off, and as you can see here, this year we've seen actually a significant increase due to a major case that we were working with the federal, actually Drug Enforcement Administration. The 2 pictures on bottom, just as a note, depict a marijuana grow operation that was in a residential area in the city of Troy. Please do make note on the lower right corner the number of firearms that were recovered from that residence.
Again, we're looking at our future challenge is to maintain the boots in the ground. We want to make sure that we're keeping the people there. We are a 24/7 operation. It takes people. It's very people intensive. What we do in order to do that is we look at the 5 V's of data. Velocity, data comes in very, very fast, as we all know. In this day and age, in the internet age, you get data 24/7, all the time. We're getting different data. We've got to try to keep up on it. The volume of data, just the pure amount of data that we get, can be overwhelming if you don't properly manage it. The variety of data in police work, we don't just get data from criminal resources, we get it from the media, we get data from a lot of places that you get your data, and we have to look at it and decide what we're going to do with it. We have to decide on whether the data is believable or not and what value it may have to us. We could get information on some data, something that seems really neat, but it doesn't really matter to us. All this data comes in, we want to look at it, we've gone over the EOC aspect, the forfeiture, what we want to do with the additional officers for the crash reduction program. We still have to do what we can to monitor issues on crimes against juveniles. We've got to make sure we're staying on top of that. We've got to do what we can to make sure that we're throwing resources at that. Fraud is a growing area of concern. Fraud is a major thing in the city of Troy. It's our crime that's trending upwards. And with the malls and the retail establishments we have, we're starting to see that the federal government is getting more and more interested in this and wants to create a task force, and we don't have the personnel to donate or to give to these task force to ultimately leverage and help us. Heroin, you'll see when the Troy Community Coalition will talk about this a little bit more. We're seeing an uptick in heroin use. You may have paid attention or heard that the county's seeing that. It's a Metro Detroit area problem. We've had more heroin overdoses this year we've had in the past few years. So heroin has become a new issue. And what we need to point out here is these are recurring trends that can occur in the middle of a budget year, they can occur after our budget's already been in. But we have to be nimble and be able to respond to these. We're going to talk more about the staffing dilemma on Wednesday night. This is just the variety of data that we get. I already discussed that we're working on dashboards to make sure we're keeping our data timely. Captain Rettman discussed our day-of-week issues that we're looking at, time of day. 60/40, you may recall from previous budget presentations, is the point that the International City Managers Association pointed out that we should be trying to maintain, where this red line is, about 60% busy if we want to remain a proactive police department. When we start exceeding that, as we have been, we're going to become a reactive police department. And that's because police officers are too busy to be out there looking for things that police officers are supposed to find. They're going to be too busy waiting for the next run or going from run to run to look for drunk drivers to prevent that fatal accident that takes up so much time to police and is a tragedy to the family. We're going to be too busy to be looking for home invasion suspects and residential and commercial burglars. We're going to be busy tied up on other runs, other calls for service. You want a proactive police department that's out there, so we have to make sure we're leveraging our people to keep them busy, to keep them available, but still busy that they're doing things, but not overly busy. And why do we want to do that? We want to keep our boots on the ground because it's our goal to once again attain the safest city ranking as we currently have in the state of Michigan for the 2013 safest city. It's our goal to try for that, to be that again next year. So the people in the police department are proud to keep going in that direction, and I think we can keep doing that. Any questions?
Just a favor. You talk about charges for services, you talk about the malls. We have a couple of malls here, but Somerset's really the only mall that's paying for a full-time police officer, and Somerset is the only mall paying for Christmas overtime detail. Is that correct? Or
No, the Oakland Mall does pay for the Christmas detail over.
They do.
Not to the same extent that Somerset does, but yes, they pay for, we put officers down there for Christmas detail and they pay for that.
Good.
Questions for police, Councilman Tease?
The change in forfeiture over the years, why is there that general trend? Is it just there are fewer criminals and they have less money?
It actually makes it more difficult to find them on yeah, it's not, the most vulnerable time for a criminal, actually is, especially if we're speaking about narcotics, is when the drugs and the money are in the same place. So you don't get those all that often. Now what they're doing is it's all electronic. So it's rare, but it still happens that occasionally you'll come across where they've got large sums of money packaged up and they're usually headed south or out of the country. The one case that we were successful in, this one for this year, it actually was $197,000. It was our portion of a $15 million case that actually was going back to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. Yeah. But that case was in the works for over 2 years.
And I think it's important to point out that the vast majority of our forfeiture money comes from our involvement with our federal task force. So we have 2 officers in our federal task force, and that's where it comes from.
Questions for police?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I neglected to mention this fine staff that's with me. I have Lieutenant Chris Stout, Lieutenant Tom Gordon, Captain Keith Fry, and Captain Robert Redmond.
Good evening. Public Works just has a few items that we're going to talk about tonight. I want to go over this operating expense chart. Start at the top, we're looking at water and sewer, and you can see it kind of go along flat, and we've got it coming up as estimated and proposed for 2014 and 2015. What you're looking at here is crystal ball. We have no idea how much water we're going to sell. The majority of our budget for water and sewer is the sale of water and the disposal of sewage. The last couple of years, it's been very wet. Our sales have been down for that reason and the economy. We're hopeful in projecting that those sales will go up somewhat. So far, after this high moisture winter, we're at a low moisture spring so far. We haven't had a lot of rain. That's typical. They're not forecasting a lot of rain or a wet season. Over the next 3 months, they're looking at actually what they would consider a normal rainfall. So we're projecting a little bit more water use. About 50% of over, or 100%, so a third of the water we sell typically is used for things other than drinking, washing your laundry, doing industrial things. It actually is what people use to put on their lawns. So we're hoping that that will go up, but if it doesn't, our costs also go down. That's just a significant part of that. Want to look down in streets and drains, you'll see that green line increase. That line looks at some of the winter weather we had, and also the 2 staff people that were requesting in this budget that Kurt's going to speak about. And then decrease in refuse dedicated millage. I don't think we can talk enough about this 1.07. Last year we were looking and talking about 1.09. We were looking at that number continuing for a year or two and then going to 1.15 based on projections of what the property values were going to be. Very happily, we're coming to you today, letting you know that that's dropping. We're looking at that to continue in the future. We have some things in the works where we've had a lot of residents request from us to look at single stream recycling and containerized refuse pickups at the curb, much what they have in Rochester Hills. This kind of shows our refuse and recycling fund. One of the items we talked about last year was fund balance. We were at $54,000. We actually then came in and we're up to $182,000 in 12-13. We're estimating that we're going to gain another $337,000, go to $520, and that's about 12%. Our goal in all of this was to get up to a 15% fund balance, and we're projecting that we'll achieve that next year. And with that, we hope that we can either continue to straight line or drop what our rate will be in the future, as long as Nino's forecast come true. I'm going to have Rick Shepler speak about the water and sewer division and our water and sewer rates.
Hi, well, what you're looking at here is our proposed water and sewer rates for next year. We got an increase of 4% on our water side from DWSD. We absorbed the most, half of that about, so we're raising it from $3.35 to $31, a 2.14% increase on the water side. And on the sewer side, we had a 4.4 increase from the DWSD. We absorbed all that. So we're going to keep the same rate we have now. We had that for the last 2 years so now. So we kind of feel we're in a good position to just watch if anything happens with DWSD. So pretty good shape there. The reason we have such low rates, and we have some of the lower rates in all of our surrounding communities. Is the next slide, Tim?
No, that's okay. Tom is going to interject on a couple of things to point out the significance of this water and sewer fund.
The water at the top, green line is what we purchase the water at. The top line, the blue line, is what we sell it at. Now, the in-between areas, the percentage is what it costs for residents for us to run our water side of our operations. We have 6 intakes that come from Detroit, 11 PRVs, pressure reducing valves those are. And so it takes a lot of maintenance, and we've had 22 water main breaks already this year, so the winter has taken a toll on us too. I think last year we had 30 total, and we got 22 already.
But as an example, Rick, how many fire hydrants do we have in town?
5,000 something.
Yep, so these are all of the things that we have, and all the pipe that goes down every mile of road, that's what we're looking at. This 33% over what we get charged is a very small amount compared to many communities
Oh, yeah.
around us.
You'll see a lot of communities 100% to 300% to run their water and sewer department. Of course, they pay for a lot of things. It's got to be very creative. But here in Troy, we're pretty stringent on that.
And part of the reason that number is so low is our engineering department, Steve Vandette and Bill Hootery, have continued to invest into our water system to replace and maintain, and that's why last year we only had, what, 39 water main breaks for the entire year. This winter we got 22 already, but it's significant when you see other communities that have as many in a week as what we had in an entire year.
In the bottom chart, same thing on the sewer side. We have two sewer districts that we're in, the George Kuhn Drain Sewer District and the Evergreen Farmington. The bottom 2 lines, the orange and the green, are what we paid Oakland County, and the top is what we sell for our residents. So that markup, the 20% is just to cover our sewer costs and do all the maintenance that we do on our sewer side. One other thing, the rates are developed through, at least the water rates are, our peak hour and our maximum daily usage. We've helped that out with our sprinkling ordinance, which has worked very well, kept those peaks down. And also the rates are also established on how far we are from the pumping stations. We can't change in our elevation. So they got to pump that uphill to us, and we pay for that. So other than that, any questions? Tom, you got some more?
If I can, Mr. Mayor? Yeah, a big thing that we talk about when we talk about our utilities is really working capital. And you'll see in your budget, on page 289 for the sewer fund and 300 for the water fund, what is our net position? Well, the net position includes, along with our working capital assets. And so I thought it's worth mentioning, what is our liquidity in these funds? And that also helps, we consider that when developing our rates. It should be noted in our water fund, we're projecting at the end of 2015 to have about $15 million in working capital. So when you look at, the net position for the water fund, you see, wow, there's $95 million. Obviously, the whole 95 isn't working capital, but 15 million of it should be. Also in the sewer fund, we have our net positions around 68 million, and of that, about 31.5 million is liquid or in working capital. And again, when I think about it, I think of them together, really, as a unit for utilities. One of the reasons that you might think that we're maintaining a little higher level than working capital is we don't like to issue debt for basically our infrastructure, and we pay as we go. And you'll notice that we're probably, at least from my experience, one of the very few districts out there that do not have debt for our water and sewer mains.
Kirk Bogan-Seek will speak on the Streets and Drains Division.
This slide is in efforts to kind of substantiate our request for 2 additional employees. There's no national standards that the streets division can go to say, how many employees should we have? So what we did is we looked at each one of these communities' CAFR reports. We identified how many miles of road they maintain. Then we picked up the phone and called them and said, how many employees do you have? So we associated that to how many employees per mile of road. And what you see here is one employee for each community's miles of road. The city of Troy currently right now has 16 employees, which is down from its high of 26 employees. At 16 employees, each employee is responsible for 25.5 miles of road. With the proposed budget, we're requesting 2 additional employees. That brings that down to 22.72 miles of road for every employee, which is still higher than some of our neighbors. So what does that mean, 2 additional streets? That means it's an additional $100,000 per year per position. So in the budget, you're just going to see a $200,000 increase per year for those positions. An increase in 2 snow routes assigned to the streets division, and that deserves a little bit of explanation. When we go out and do major roads, we have 16 total runs. With 16 drivers currently, we never like to put all the drivers out at once because of our 24-hour operation. So we usually put half. So we're pulling from other divisions. We're pulling from the Parks Division. We're pulling from the Water Division. As Mayor and some council members took a ride with our plow drivers this winter, it's not as easy as it looks. And what this does is these 2 streets individuals are assigned to run. They get familiar with the run. They know where the curves are. They know where it might need a little extra salt. So it greatly increases productivity out there on the roads. What this also does is there is a little bit of decrease in revenue, or excuse me, in expenditures for overtime. If we're borrowing from a department, we may not be getting a lower classification employee. We might actually be getting a higher classification employee, which costs more. So there will be a little bit of cost savings in overtime related to that. When we're not doing snow, in the summertime, we're going to be putting these 2 members to our road improvement projects. Currently, we have 5 crew members on our concrete crew. That will be going up to 7. The vast majority of our concrete slab replacement is done by a contractor. However, what we do in-house is usually something that there's more going on than just pavement failure. There's usually a storm structure associated with this. So once we pick up the pavement, we have to fix what's underneath. We put the pavement back. That's what that crew would be responsible for. So we increase that from 5 to 7. We get more productivity out of it. Any questions on that? And just one other point here. If you were to look at page 43 of the budget book, it's the major and local street funds. Major and local street funds, what that is that's Public Act 51. That's our weight and gas tax funds. That is, and maybe Tom can explain a little bit better, but what we do is we represent the expenses from the streets division in the general fund, and then it's a transfer in from the major and local street fund, which is funded by Public Act 51. You can look at the fund balance of both those funds, the major and local. They are healthy. They continue to be healthy. So we feel that these 2 positions can be funded through that without a whole lot of effect from the major and local street fund.
I'd like to go back and something that just kind of jumped out to me that may not jump out to everyone. If you look at these other communities that are Clawson, Birmingham, Ferndale, Royal Oak, one thing that doesn't show up here, they use all of their street employees to do leaf collection at the curb in the fall. When I worked for Lathrop Village in Pleasant Ridge, that was the #1 most expensive service we provided to those communities. That is significant impact on the number of people that they have that work in their street divisions. And the fire department?
It's a good time to take a break.
This is the break session.
Just one question before, is this an opportunity to bring back 2 positions that were eliminated? an opportunity to bring those workers back?
The DPW was pretty fortunate that we didn't do any layoffs that didn't transfer in from other departments. It was completely done through attrition. So to bring someone back that was laid off 3 or 4 years ago, there is no one to bring back because it was all done through attrition.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Horvath?
I just wanted to make a comment that Public Works always, to me, is this unsung hero of the community. You guys are doing that work that we all take for granted, kind of like breathing every day. And when you look at these numbers and the efficiencies and how you work together to achieve those efficiencies, just please keep doing it. It really pays huge dividends. You can see it in the numbers, not to mention in our quality of life. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
9 o'clock? Take a break till 9?
2 hours?
From now.
Yeah.
From now?
No, we'll do it.
You can help him out, Mike.
I'll do whatever I can.
This is so much easier than what we had 2 years ago. Look for a little something like that. This is almost class.
Well, I remember hearing that that old process was described as a freight train that you couldn't stop.
You say what?
Okay. All right, we are back in session. Mr. Kishnick, I see fire is next on the program.
And the fire chief is ready.
Good evening.
Evening, Mayor and members of council. Fortunately, the fire department list of issues is rather short, but rather expensive. First item is Fire Station 4 replacement. I don't know how much more we have to talk about that. You've all had a chance to walk it. You've had a chance to almost to spend time there, and we've gone through all the discrepancies and the deficiencies we have. But basically, we're proposing to build a new station literally on the same site, and it's a $3.7 million investment over 2 years. One of the big things we want to talk about is the incentive program. And basically, the incentive program, and nobody I don't think was here on council back then, but was instituted in the early 80s. And what it was designed to do was help us retain volunteer firefighters. What would happen is we'd get a young volunteer fire department would join the department, a firefighter would join the department. He would, we'd put him through a lot of training, he'd gain a lot of experience. In the normal course of activities, he'd get married, he'd have a couple kids. Then the other social pressures would start with everything from soccer games, dance recitals. We all know the drill, right, with kids. And what would happen is there'd be pressure to cut other outside activities. And I know the drill because I lived it, having started here as a volunteer. And we needed a way to help maintain. We had a tremendous investment in time, training, and experience in our volunteer firefighters. How do we keep them? Because it's pretty easy to walk away from a job that you make no money at, okay? And it just takes your time. So the city council at the time came up with a plan and said, you know, we looked at a lot of different things. Well, we could pay people, we could do all this stuff, but bottom line is we were looking for something innovative that would allow us to kind of put a hook in and set it, and once our volunteer was hooked, he couldn't get off the hook. And what happened was the incentive plan. And there, basically what happens is we pay them a little bit after they complete the service. So, in order to qualify for a benefit, volunteer has to serve 30 years as a firefighter and be of any age, serve 25 years at age 50, 10 years at age 55, and there are requirements. He doesn't just, because his name's on the roster, he doesn't automatically accrue this benefit. He has to basically respond to 50% of all the calls that occur while he's available, and we have a very sophisticated system, complements of IT, that helps us track availability. So we know when you're supposed to be available, when you say you're at work, when you say you're on discretionary leave time, and if you're not on either working or on leave, you better be at 50% of the fires. And the other thing is they have to attend a minimum of 60 hours of training annually. Most of our volunteers put in more than that, but that's the bare minimum. So those are the requirements in order to be credited with a year of service. The benefit is a base multiplier times the number of years of service, pretty basic. And just as an example there, a firefighter that serves 25 years, reaches age 50, would receive a base benefit of $15,125 per year for life, which is just 605 times 25. And there are different options for that. We're not going to get into that, but there are just different ways that you can take it if you're married, et cetera, et cetera. In looking at the plan, and it's been in existence since the early 80s, we've identified some problems with it. And a number of those are been brought up by volunteers over the years. One was political security and stability. Another was our financial folks identified some issues with investing, because this is basically just government money, can only be invested the way the government can typically invest money, not the way pension systems invest money. So the answer to that is, we did some research, worked with some experts, and came up with an IRS Section 115 trust. And this is a vehicle that we can create that will hold the assets of the plan, and it provides security for the plan. It eliminates one of the problematic issues we have now, which is called the lump sum distribution, which is an option, which if you have 5 or 6 people retire in a year and take the lump sum, it puts a pretty heavy hit on the plan. So just 115 trusts are not qualified plans, so you can't roll over into another vehicle without paying tax on that. And then it permits much more flexible investment, which we see as very healthy for the system. We meet with a committee of volunteer firefighters. Each station designates a representative, and the 6 representatives meet with administration. We've been meeting now for 8 months or so, talking about the whole concept of the 115 trust and other changes. One of the challenges that we have is, whenever we get together and meet like this, I don't want to call it a negotiation, because how do you negotiate with somebody that saves you millions of dollars a year? It's very difficult, in my mind anyway. So basically, one of the things that they suggested was, let's try to index the benefit to something else, so that we don't have to literally sit down and we don't do it, arm wrestle or whatever every couple of years to figure out what the benefit's going to be. And one of the things that came up was utilizing a percentage of one of our entry-level employees, his DB pension, as the index. So whenever that changed, the benefit for the volunteers would change. The challenge is, none of our entry-level employees are in a DB plan, so basically we're talking about a hypothetical number, and that becomes a little bit more abstract. So they put out a proposal to have it kind of mirror about 1/3 of what one of our entry-level career employees makes. And these would become the multipliers. So we're working on discussing this. We're working on actuarial reports on what this costs, things like that. But basically, they had proposed to have it go up annually, and then potentially after that, put some kind of a multiplier. And they had originally thrown out 2.5, but we kind of mentioned that there's hardly anybody getting 2.5% raises that we're aware of. So, but that was an initial proposal that was made, and we worked that, costed that out. Just to give you an idea, the current cost, which is what we're paying today, which is the $605 per year as a multiplier, we budgeted $1,078,000, and the other issue is mortality tables. Actuaries use different mortality tables, and the newer mortality tables basically show that we're going to live longer. If you live longer, what happens to benefits? You pay them longer. So what this reflects is utilizing a new mortality table, which is more realistic for the plan. But what it does is it drives up our costs from our $1,178,000 up to $1,222,142. Okay, and then we already budgeted for $642 for the current year that we're in, and the cost for that year goes up again considerably. And then we don't even have actuarials on the next 3 years. So it is an issue that we need to wrestle with and grapple with and make sure that we can come up with something that's equitable, but at the same time is something that we can absorb the cost. Just as an FYI, you do have, under your general fund balance, under the committed column, you do have a reserve of $1 million that is committed to the Volunteer Fire Incentive Plan. That is there, and doesn't come out of your unassigned fund balance if you were to choose to use that for any portion of this.
So remember the police chief talked about the liability, 400,000 is what he reduced his budget by, and he said it was already in there. Here it is in the assigned self-insurance general liability right here. So I really like this slide for a lot of reasons. It shows where all the restrictions or assignments or committed, all the different levels are. So not only the $1 million that was set aside to show the stability for the firefighter incentive plan, but the general liability assignment.
Are there any questions?
Questions for Chief?
So these projected costs, working with the actuaries, this is an ongoing working process. Nothing's close to being settled yet. What kind of timetable are you projecting to have something that you think will be acceptable? Is this a year away, or?
I think we're getting close. I think we have to pull the trigger on this. There are people that are waiting to retire and find out, and otherwise we're gonna have a run on retirements because people are gonna see, something changing that they perceive as unfavorable. We've been working with them for about 8 months, and we're setting up another meeting right now, and we'll go from there. I know Tom is a big part of this, and so is Brian. Do you guys would like to?
If I can. Yeah, just let me to chime in real quick. Basically, what we presented was what the volunteers were asking for. They were asking for that graduated scale, 14 through 17, coming from basically again, the slide before, $605 as the multiplier up to, I believe, $769.
Right here.
Okay, yes, thank you. The $1,416,000 is a valuation that we just got back, and that was using that valuation. Theoretically, if everything remained the same, it would be that 1.4 million through the years. And again, it should be noted, really, is that that's using the new mortality tables and actuary assumptions that we used to develop the $1,078,000. Okay, and that's what one of the big factors there is.
But the same 6.5% return on investment that all the others that we use in our other retirement systems.
Exactly.
Not 8, 9 like sometimes you see. So it's still that conservative 6.5. So to answer the question, we've been working on this for quite some time. The real hang-up was the plan, establishing the trust, and that looks to be about to the end game now. So one more meeting, and then we'll have to probably have a study session and get real direction on where these numbers are going. But what we didn't know, when we had this schedule, we didn't know what's it gonna cost, right? So we had the actuarial done, I don't know what's the date of that, but I think I sent it out.
So just got it. It's pretty warm still.
Yeah, it's pretty warm, so it's an April thing. So we need to go back and discuss, what the dollars are.
So we have to increase the budget for 15 to 1.4.
If you do this new schedule.
1.6, or $500,000.
But we won't make that decision during this budgeting process.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
We approved 642 last year. That's why we wanted to know where we were, but not this graduated schedule that Tom just talked about, which is why the numbers are a little different. And so we'll come back once we have had more discussion. It'd be premature to have a new, now that we have numbers to go back and talk about, we can't get that done before this budget process. We just wanted to bring this to your attention that this is happening, and what's in the budget and any kind of change, or any plan change will come talk to you all.
So what are we budgeting for 15?
We budget $1,078,000.
Right.
$1,078,000 is what we budget, which we're basing that on 642, and that's where it stops.
Okay. And then we'll have a separate study session to discuss.
Correct. Which is a continuation of last year.
There's really no reason to go back and discuss some of the incentive issues at this point. I have a couple of questions on that incentive side, but that would be better for the study session.
Yeah. To be honest, when we were going over this today, I think what I said was, this is more of an Wednesday night issue thing. But we've never addressed it, and it's a pretty significant number. And then the history is important of why we have it. And so we wanted to at least share it on Monday night.
Good.
So we're budgeting 1.078, and then we may adjust that.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have that reserve of $1 million in case we had something.
Okay.
And there's more to it, to Councilmember Keats's point many months ago. This actuary actually shows the impact if you have a cash infusion of, I forget what we asked for, but $2, $4, $6, $8 million. I think I shared some of that with the council, the lower levels. But we'll be presenting all that once we go through it.
Questions for the fire chief?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm ready to go.
I'm ready. Mr. Kishnick, are we ready for recreation?
We are.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to make a brief presentation related to recreation. But before I start, I want to remind everyone, before the first of this year, we did appoint Elaine Bowe as Recreation Director, an internal candidate, and also Brian Gould as Assistant Recreation Director, who's here. Elaine had scheduled to be out of town before she knew about this. But next year, she better plan on being here.
It sounds so much softer when we talk to her.
So there's three main points that I want to demonstrate. One being that the community center and recreation program is sustainable. And this chart, if you look at, now this pointer isn't working for me, so I'm gonna have to get up. Oh, there. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna get up. If we look at 2012, total revenues were $3.4 million approximately, and the recreation expenditures, well, there you go. Recreation expenditures were almost $3 million, and then that meant that the revenues contributed $460,000 towards the administrative costs of running the recreation department. And the same thing follows through for 2013, $3.6 million. Expenditures, $2.9 million in change, and therefore $367,000 contribution towards the administrative costs. And then as we move forward into the next budget year, we're projecting almost $3.7 million of revenue, $3.3 million, just over that, in expenditures, and then those revenues will contribute $337,000 towards the administrative costs. So what we really want to quickly demonstrate is that the revenues coming in really sustain the activities for the community center and recreation as indicated previously. Why that's important is then they can add staff and have confidence. They're going to add an additional part-time staffing to fill a need of trying to enhance banquet and birthdays, and it's a belief in recreation that this position would be covered by revenues. In 2014, there's on the left, this is a list of new activities: Park IT, Day of Play, Blue Owl Splash, Daddy-Daughter Dance, and Dog Swim. For the upcoming year, there's a list, an extensive list, I'll just pick a couple: nursery, school Olympics, hike for health, punt, pass, and kick for youth day, and just some newer things. But there is also an emphasis on 50 and up pickleball event coming out. And any questions on that? I'm going to move quickly to the aquatic center. Like I said, I was going to move quickly. And Brian, feel free to chime in. This is your expertise. What is important to really note with the aquatic center, oh, here's this one, is that historically, the revenues exceeded expenditures. However, last fiscal year, remember we had a really cold late spring, early summer, and that contributed to having a shortfall. We're estimating coming up forward that there will be sufficient funds, and then in proposed 2015, there will be $36,000 over expenditures. Now, we also did a process of reaching out to USA Pools and American Pool Entertainment to get proposals on how much it would cost to privatize these functions. And basically what we found out is that we can do it for less and have better and more programming, because those bids didn't include things like swim lessons, correct, Brian?
A certain amount of swim lessons,
okay, yeah.
not as much as we are.
Right. So basically, Brian prepared a list of pros and cons, but the most important con of privatizing is that it costs more. I'll take any questions.
It's the best one to put number one.
That's what Brian said.
Well, we went through, we had a small group, and Brian can talk about the process a little better because he was really intimate. I was involved in the interviews when we called the companies in because I wanted to be sure, should we be contracting this out or shouldn't we? And when you look at it, there's a couple of barriers or obstacles. First of all, we weren't able to find, or at least Brian and his team weren't able to find others in the industry who do the things around here. They both came from out of state, Southern Climates,
Georgia.
was it Georgia? Many of them work in military installations or private clubs. When you look at the private clubs around here, they're not contracted out. It just isn't that, it hasn't risen to that mass of people contracting for the services. And then when you interview these two, at least main players, as I understand it, and one that did not bid, was that right, Brian?
Yeah, one company did.
Was not interested, but when you talk to them for over the course of an hour, what you learn real quickly is they really are going to come in and use your people anyway, and you're going to be burdened and saddled with many of the management decisions and requirements anyway. So we weren't able to see a justifiable savings. In fact, it was going to cost more, and they weren't interested in many of the programs. I mean,
And also
that's
just to put in there too, that price is based just on the pool being open hours. It has been in the past just for open swim. Any additional swim time or additional programs is gonna be an additional expense onto what it is. So those numbers are actually, we would lose more if we actually went with them. Those are very, generous numbers for them. Right, this upcoming year, we're opening the pool 10 for season pass holders, so that would be an extra hour added on, and then we have lap swims and things like that that they didn't incorporate in as well, so it would be a higher expense.
So as was sent out, there's a lot more backup detail than just these 3 lines.
Yeah.
This summarizes it very briefly, but Brian put together all the spreadsheets that detailed all the expenses and where our costs were our cost and theirs were their, management's. It's a tough one. Anyway.
Engineering.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Tom indicated earlier, engineering's cost for consultant inspection services is up significantly in the proposed 2015 budget. It's also up significantly in the current year, and that's good news and bad news, which I'll explain in just a minute. But who are our consultants? Oops. Who are our consultants and what do they do? We have 3 general engineering service consultants. We have HRC, OHM, Spalding, D. Decker Associates. And we have 2 testing engineering firms. These are geotechnical firms. They provide testing services on our construction projects. And we use them when expertise is not available, when capacity is exceeded. And we use our consultants, every one of them, we use them throughout the year because we do not have staff sufficient in numbers to do everything that needs to be done in terms of private development and construction activity. Most importantly, the reason why our costs are up is to augment staff when spikes in workload occur, and that spike has to do with private development. We're seeing a lot of private development occur, subdivisions, site condo developments. Our consulting services, we use all of them, HRC, Spalding, and OHM for this work. And yes, we do use consultant inspectors for road inspections, but they're not the Troy Roads Rock program. The inspections that our consultants do have to do with the private developments like the Bridgewater Estates and Oak Forest and Oaks and those. All of the inspection on Troy Roads Rock on that program is done by the Road Commission for Oakland County. And we learned just a couple of weeks ago that the Road Commission does not have adequate staff to do all the inspections either. They will be using consultants on that program. So again, on our road program that's starting tomorrow, all of the inspection is being done by Road Commission for Oakland County and supplemented by consultants. This slide shows some of the other things we use consultants for, studies, testing services, as I mentioned, and unique design projects such as the Transit Center and many others that we've done in the past. So inspection services are up $325,000. They're up in the current year, and we expect that trend to continue based on what we see in the pipeline in terms of development that's coming forward. This increase brings us to a level of inspection back to the pre-recession, back to 2005, 2006 level. Brings us back to that. But that was when we had 5 full-time inspectors. We now only have 1 full-time inspector and 1 inspection supervisor. Mainly the inspection supervisor is overseeing all of the consultants that we have out there. So while this is encouraging, we see this as a trend that development is increasing and our costs are increasing along with that. We don't know whether this is a long-term trend or a short-term trend. We're certainly going to be keeping our eye on it to see if it is a long-term trend. If it is, then we will be looking at perhaps adding staff in the inspection area so that we can do our inspection on a more efficient and economic manner. As far as expense and revenue, they're pretty close. There's a $30,000 gap on the far right. You see in the 2015 proposed $30,000 gap between revenue and expenditures. Our revenue, we are forecasting about a $250,000 increase in revenue, and that has in some part is due to increased development and the increased permit fees that we get for soil erosion and permits, for permit to construct within the right-of-way, and for all of the other inspections that we do associated with development, water, sewer, roads, and so forth. Do you have any questions?
Questions for Steve? Well, let's do good news.
Bad.
I think it's good news.
Yep.
You want me to show you how to use that?
Evening, everyone. I was gonna say, the good news is I have 11 slides. I was gonna say the bad news is I won't go into a lot of detail on them, but now I think I need to. So I know what I'm talking about, right? But basically, I'm gonna cover kind of two areas. One is, I want to take this opportunity to look at the current use of technology, to kind of give you a behind-the-scenes look at how we're using the technology that you've invested in the past, and I'll try to go through that fairly quickly, so we take a lot of time. Then I'll look at what the technology in the current budget, starting with the library position that we're asking for, and some other things that we're doing. So it all started on a cold night, when the storms rolled in, and it looks like tonight it might be a little bit cooler too, who knows, we'll even extend that record a little bit farther. When Kurt came to our offices the next day and was looking for a way to improve the snow and ice control processes that were used in the city. And I think this is a good example of, again, collaboration and how we use our technology. I'll turn it over to Kurt to kind of explain the goals that he had in mind.
So one of the things was to improve the internal communication. That was how we get the drivers on the road as quickly as we can, and we'll go over that in the next couple slides. Provide accurate cost estimates. We like to give City Council accurate cost per event so we can make decisions on if we're going in the right direction. And timely communication to the public. That was done as an afterthought, pretty reactionary, but we'll explain that as we get a little further as well. So this slide here depicts one of the first things we did with the snow removal process. Recently dubbed the IT department as the war room. I came into the war room and said, Kurt, we have to do something about this. How we get the guys out on the roads is the police department calls me, I call the supervisor goes into the office, assesses the road, calls each individual employee, waits 5 minutes for a response, and then calls the next employee. It was just, we weren't getting those trucks on the road fast enough. So went to Gert, she said, well, we've got this product, Spark Messaging, let's use it. We push one button, it calls everyone on that crew. They have an opportunity to text back, use prompts on their phone to say they're available or not. And we can be on the road within an hour from the police department calling us now.
And I wanted to point out here the different pieces of software that are in use in play in this whole process. It seems fairly simple, but we've got quite a few different systems that we've invested in the past. And I'll move on to another slide where it shows some more for our local control. This doesn't work. So that was the major roads. And then February, snow hit us again. We had about 2 feet of snow in the local roads. And I think you were getting calls from some little ladies in the neighborhood wondering what's going on with the snow.
Yep, so one of our biggest concerns from constituents were when they called the DPW as far as snow removal is, when is my street gonna be plowed? And why is my neighbor always first? So what we did is we came up with this real-time interactive map. One of the goals as I entered the war room and told Gert, I said, Gert, one of the major concerns here is we have to make this easy for the supervisors in the field because their main job is to make sure that the roads are safe, not necessarily communicate to the public. So we developed this interactive map using Freonce, which is a software that we already have. The supervisors, as the sections get done, they simply go on their iPad from wherever they're at, change that status to complete. Again, you can see where we're anticipated on going, what is complete, and you can see how that rotation changes per event. So we've got a lot of positive comments back from constituents on this, saying that it makes sense now. It's just not randomly done. No, my neighbor is not always first. So this was a really, really good thing.
So hopefully all of you have seen this when we put it up. And really, this is the workflow that goes into that. I mean, it sounds, again, very simple, send the guys out on the road, map updates, everybody's happy. So the systems that we use are CityWorks, which is our asset management and work order and service request system. And then Smart Message, which Kurt already described to notify everyone. And then the snow portal that we created from a work order that was created. It automatically activates the snow portal, and again, using the GIS software, ESRI, that we've invested in. And GeoCortex is another piece of software that works with GIS to allow us to create these nice portals. Then we did update social media, and that was done manually, but the next go-around, we're already talking about how we can automate that. And then the supervisors actually, as Kurt described, update in the field. They can just go in and with this app that we invested in, Freelance, that works with CityWorks, can update it right then and there, and immediately the map gets updated. And then the time entry on the back end, once the guys are done, they fill out their timesheets. And along with that, we convert that over into CityWorks to this work order that was created at the beginning, so that we actually have a good cost estimate, not even an estimate, it's actual costs of the time that these guys were on the road. And we pull the hourly rate from New World Systems, and then CCG Systems is the fleet maintenance software, so we pull the vehicle rates from there, and then all of that goes over into the CityWorks system, and then we manually complete it. So there's quite a few systems in play here, and as you can see, the green ones are custom developed applications or integrations between systems, and then the blue ones are the out-of-the-box solutions. So, again, there's quite a few success factors, and we'll go through each one of them, but really it was a very cooperative effort. And I think two of the keys are the investment in technology that was at our disposal. We had that technology, we knew how to use it, so we could quickly, within a month for each one of those applications, bring something up. And then the staffing, Kurt's willingness to use new technology, and then Alex Bellick and Rob Bittner in the IT department, their expertise really helped us pull it all together. So with that, now I want to talk about what's in the budget for the IT department. And first I want to talk about the library position. It would be a full-time, initially contract position, a help desk position, costing about $88,000 per year. One of the things that will allow us to do is actually have somebody on site at the library for all hours that they're open. Right now, they're only there basically the same hours of our normal operating hours, from about 8 to 4:30. But this will allow us to have somebody there whenever there's anybody there, so if a problem comes up, we can immediately address it. We were on call, but that's just over the phone, it's not always immediate enough to address things. And then I'll turn it over to Kathy Russ, Library Director. She can give you kind of her vision of this position.
Is it okay if I stand down here? Spoon a little bit? Okay. Well, what we know from the library strategic plan, and now from the focus groups, is that what people want to see from the library is more technology. And when I say technology, I don't mean public computers. I don't mean a way for people to come in and check their email or use the internet. People want to see loanable e-readers, they want to see maker spaces, they want to see creation stations, they want to see 3D printers, they want to see all the new cool stuff that a tech-savvy community is into and wants to see. So what we want to do is provide that. You took a huge step forward in helping us achieve that goal last year when you approved the addition of the technology specialist position. Anna Cangelosi has been on the job 5 months. She already has a technology plan, a technology marketing plan. She helped coordinate the Start With Why retreat in her spare time. And within the next 6 months, we are going to be rolling out our new loanable e-reader program, which is going to be great. Talking to Gert, though, what we realized is that we need help with some of the, what I'll call infrastructure, networking, helping with the hardware, helping us learn these devices, and doing things like what Kurt just demonstrated, how those different softwares could maybe work together to increase the library's workflow. Anna handles the software side of things, but we need help on the IT side of things. So we thought that this contract position would be a good way to address that, see how it works. We think that it's going to work really well, but we'll give it a try without committing to a full-time permanent position. And it'll help us achieve our goals to bring the technology that the community wants to the library and give people that opportunity to connect with each other and with technology. So if I had 3 words to sum it up, I would say more, faster, and exciting. And a great example of interdepartmental collaboration.
So as far as staffing goes, in addition to the full-time library position, we're also asking to increase the part-time application support specialist to full-time. We actually had that position in the budget back in 2005, but then we split it to 2 part-time positions, and then we lost one of the part-time positions and just kept one. I had a very good person in that position part-time, and she has now left. So I'm looking to reinstate that as a full-time position so I can attract, good candidates. And there's also a lot of financial software. It'll basically focus on financial software that we need to support. We are going to replace 2 servers this year, and each year we'll do some hardware replacements. And software is the biggest area really this year. We're going to replace our existing Microsoft Outlook with 2013. That's about a $150,000 investment. And that will keep us current with technology. Our current version 2007 is actually no longer supported by Microsoft. And we'll also get some new features that we can take advantage of. Our document management system is called OnBase, and I like to try and use the software we have as much as possible. Hopefully I demonstrated that before. And this would be an expansion of that, a couple of different modules. One would be to be able to view documents in the field on a device, so they're apps for your phone, your iPad, that type of thing. And the other one is more of a kind of training tool where you can have documents and then you can test people. It will replace a device that we have now called Moodle that the police department uses for training, and we can also use it to disseminate our ad memos and track who's read them and things like that. And then the last item, which is an enterprise electronic time and attendance system, which I'm estimating about $200,000 cost. That would essentially replace the daily timesheet piece that I talked about. That's a custom design application that we have. That would hopefully give us the ability to do things in the field and enter time on an app in the field. That's something we don't have now. But the other main feature is that it will hopefully eliminate all paper time cards. Right now, we still do some paper time cards, especially for the DPW. They're very detailed as far as what they're working on, local roads, major roads, parks. It takes a lot of time for the staff to fill those out. So it'll reduce duplicate data entry and hopefully less errors. And it'll provide easy access to everyone in the city to time entry, to time off requests, allow online supervisor approvals, ensure compliance for collective bargaining agreements. Right now, a lot of that's done manually. And then employee scheduling, and possibly use, I know the police department's been looking at something like that for years, and the library and probably Parks and Recreation could take advantage of that for their part-time employees. So that's basically the main items in the budget this year.
If there is one thing you've done to help out council, it's that real-time updating road snow removal map. That is a great thing, because that has eliminated a lot of calls to us. So thanks.
That's for sure. Been able to diffuse, how come my neighbor's getting their snow? Councilman Finn.
Yes.
Or Fleming, I'm sorry.
No problem. Is there a payback to this enterprise electronic time and attendance? It's $200,000. It's the payback as far as manpower.
I understand. I wouldn't say yes to that. I think it will free up people to do other work than spend their time on timesheets. Right now, as I mentioned, we have an internal system that we program whenever we want to make a change. There is programming time that the programmer has to dedicate to make those changes. And it's difficult to maintain as technology changes. It's much better to have an outside vendor who keeps up with that technology and can make those changes at a more rapid pace.
I have to point to DPW. We have, 100 employees down there. We have seasonal staff that come in. And one of the things that has happened over time, and when the ICMA report came and we had a reduction in actually supervisors, field supervisors, we used to have 2 per division, and those are reduced down to 1 per division with them becoming a divisional supervisor, gave them more responsibilities. Historically, those folks would go out, inspect projects, generate work, make sure that the community was getting the services that we wanted to provide them. When we reduced down to 1 supervisor in each of those divisions, it took a lot of the investigative time for those folks out of what they were doing. We became more of a, as the chief mayor said, a reactive department. In order to get back to that, what this will do is, let's say Mike Sackner, Mike Schlegelman, 2 of the guys in streets and water that are out there in the field all the time, they'll have an iPad, a project's coming up, they get a call and they're looking at snow and, who am I have to draw from? They're gonna be able to go on their iPad, draw up who's available, and as Gert mentioned, we have contract requirements that we have to, spread evenly the overtime around. Instead of them spending time driving back to the office to look at that kind of stuff, it's gonna be at hand. So it's gonna give us maybe not a dollar for dollar benefit that we can ideally track, but it's gonna make us more efficient with the staff we have, particularly the supervisory staff.
And if I can tag on to that, I have 8 full-time employees. One of them spends every pay period for a good 4 hours on timesheets. That's 10% of her work week on timesheets. Copying timesheets, logging hours, so on and so forth. Having her not have to do that will give me 4 hours back that I can have her do some other things. More to the point though, I'm thrilled about that, but I'm super thrilled. We have, at the library, 89% of my employees are part-time. I have full-time department heads who are supervising 15 to 20, even bigger if you consider some of the pages and that, some lower paid staff. So the schedule tends to be a jigsaw puzzle because a lot of these employees are also working second jobs. So they can work this day, they can't work this day, but on Tuesdays at 10:30 they have to do this. And these supervisors who are my full-time staff members spend a lot of time on scheduling, a lot of time. And when one thing changes, it's almost like pulling the pin out of the schedule, the house, or the cart house, it falls down, they have to start all over again. So just in terms of time and efficiency and effectiveness, and doing the work that we want to do and should be doing for our patrons, it's gonna be huge.
And I'd like to mention 2 more things to that point. One of the things is that we have a time clock down at DPW. The company that maintains that time clock doesn't have any parts anymore. If something breaks, they have to manually make a new part for it. It's not cheap. The other thing is, the gentleman who works on those time clocks, and there's a number of them in Southeast Michigan, he retired 20 years ago. They've retained him because he's the only one who knows how to work on these time clocks. We're on borrowed time already. The other thing about what Gert mentioned, when our employees fill out their time cards currently, then the field supervisor has to check them. Then they come up to the superintendents and they review to make sure that they're all there and those types of things. We'll be able to have that electronic approval system, and it'll add up the number of hours to make sure that they've already got 40 hours credited for that. It'll be leave time or work time. What tends to happen is, every pay period, we're searching around. Hey, what happened to this one timesheet? A guy forgot to fill it out, or it got set on the supervisor's desk and it's got stuck underneath some other paperwork. It absorbs a lot of time that will be eliminated because electronically everybody will be able to look at it and they'll be able to verify before it ever goes to finance that everybody is accounted for, and that's important.
Well, I might as well chime in. If we're talking about payback, because I really believe there is, we're talking about redundancy of time entry here and tracking. One of our most intricate parts, again, is in parks and in our streets, where we're trying to divide a person's time during one particular day into maybe 5 different business units. And that's really how we track, our expenditures and what we're allocating to these different endeavors, if you will. So with that, with this type of system, there are some internal controls that I typically like. And again, Tim alluded to one of them, is to make sure, the hours are adding up, right? The payback too then is, if I lose my redundancy that I've got, in finance, where you've got 2 people, that's all they do payroll week is data entry and checking, and instead of doing that, they're just checking, to make sure, using the internal controls instead of data entry. They're gonna save on overtime, I know that's a fact. Now, the payback is, now I can guide them to do other things that we really need, instead of just time entry, to enhance basically our processing and our reporting abilities. So there is a payback.
The answer is there is a payback. We'll see it somewhere, but there is a payback.
Short answer? I think the short answer is discuss.
If you'd like me to give you the long answer?
No. I'm sorry to ask the question. There's a payback, I just want to see where it is.
But we will say this, GERT will present the findings as, 2 to 3 years from now, how it's working and why. I mean, that's the short answer.
Payback. Let's see it.
And it does not include police and fire, is that correct?
Pardon me?
It does not include police and fire. Time sheets, or it does?
It will.
Okay. I speak for the chief, but I bet that's worth $200,000. Elections.
So basically, every 2 years, you'll see a spike in the elections budget because of the even year August and the even year November elections, which are some of our bigger elections. I'm not going to go through everything, but basically there are challenges and solutions for both of these elections specifically. The August election, I'll just touch on one. Cross-voting ballots, the 2-party ballot creates confusion, and through proper training and increased election inspectors, we're able to resolve a lot of these issues before those ballots get tossed out. And as an example, in August of 2012, about 1,500 ballots would have been tossed out by the election equipment. So it's 10% of the people that voted because they cross-voted their ballots. In November, the November gubernatorial is our second highest turnout election, and it also has one of the longer ballots. For example, in 2010, gubernatorial ballot had 19 races and 6 questions for voters to consider. That just takes a long time for people to go over that. Again, more inspectors and more training for the inspectors is the solution to those issues. Best practices, President Obama, after the November 2012 presidential election, put together the Presidential Commission on Election Administration to come up with a list of best practices for election administrators, and some of these are increased number of inspectors, increased training for inspectors, and I'm working towards doing that, providing more training for our inspectors. We're required to do it every 2 years. I'm going to do more than that to make sure that everybody's trained, especially with the August primary, because it's very complicated. November, I'm comparing November election payroll. So you can see up here that the gubernatorial is our second highest costing election. We also have to have the second highest number of election workers for that election as well, simply to take care of the number of voters that turn out. And then this slide just shows the impact of the election inspector payroll on the overall budget for elections. It's about 35% of the budget. It's our single highest line item in that budget. And you can see that as, for the 2012, depending on the budget year, those costs go up or down depending on if we have a presidential or gubernatorial election in that budget year. Any questions?
Something we can't say no to.
But no, the impact on the bottom line is really the work that they do, and the percentages can be skewed to be a higher percentage, but it's because of the elections. And go ahead, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how you save the city money.
Right. There's a process, ballot testing sounds like it would be easy, but there's actually a very complicated formula that goes into it. What usually happens is we surround this, there are people surrounding this table, all working on marking test ballots, and then we have to do 31 live precincts and 31 absentee precincts. We have to do, for the gubernatorial election, each precinct will have about 50 ballots that we have to mark and test before we can use the election equipment. There are companies out there that charge up to $250 per precinct, so that would be 61 precincts times 250. It works out to be about $10,000 per election. We do all of that in-house. So I have a team of staff members combined with temporary college students that I can, I pay them like $10 an hour or something. They'll come in and help us mark ballots, and then we go through the testing process. It's all overseen by my staff. And we end up saving, like in 2012, for example, the 2012-13 budget year, we saved $40,000 by doing that.
It's not easy either. It's a very difficult
Brian's
process.
done it.
I've done it, and I've contracted out.
I would like to note that she's the only one that said she saves it.
There you go, saving us money again.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
The last time the Troy Historical Society presented to you was in September when we brought you our 3-year strategic plan. So really, this is an update on that plan and kind of a review of where we are. The most critical financial issue we identified in the strategic plan was our financial sustainability. I want to report to you that through the third quarter of the current fiscal year, we are on track for revenues from our program revenue from school groups and facilities rentals. We're tracking at 74%, 75% through donations. That translates that we're looking to generate another $13,000 in the last quarter of this year for donations. $700 came in today, so it's an ongoing thing. And I thank the council for their personal donations as members. Your investment in the Historical Society is making our job of generating money a reality. We were able to hire a part-time fund development director in January of this year. In 4 short months, he has developed a fund development plan. He has reached out to many businesses and individuals who have visited the village. We're not building just friendships, but long-term relationships that will translate into real dollars. And they have already translated into a significant in-kind donation and a new grant, which are helping us with our second critical issue, which is increasing public awareness. A number of you were at our event at Ruth's Chris in late March. Because of that event, we were approached by a web development company from Madison Heights. They have offered us an in-kind donation with a value of $20,000 to develop an entirely new dynamic website, increasing our online presence, making it easier for people to make purchases, donations, etc. online, creating the search engine optimization that will help us to really be a regional facility. This is an outstanding gift, and it wouldn't have been possible without that event and without Mr. Zuz's work. We also received a grant from Allegra here in Troy, which is going to help us print new materials for the village, including marketing materials, new rollout materials for a new membership program, a new general brochure for the village, legacy giving materials, and a multi-use folder so that we can do professional presentations. It's very exciting. Your investment also helped us to hire a part-time marketing coordinator, and I think many of you have already seen her work visible in our newsletter, in our online presence. She has improved our branding image, our marketing, developed a new marketing plan which was just rolled out to our board this month. and enhanced our social media presence. Just today, one image that went up on Facebook got 281 hits, just like that. So we're very pleased with that. We've also used some of those resources to hire collections consultants who are making our collections more available to the public, and they will be in virtual collections in our new website. One of the important aspects of our strategic plan was our own cultural, our organizational culture, and that translates into changing how the Historical Society views themselves and the work they do. It's important for you to know that each one of our board members has made their own financial commitment to the Historical Society this year, and that a significant financial commitment has been codified into their policies for future boards, so that every individual on our board is making a significant financial contribution every year. They are also putting more time in. Each of our board members is working in one or more active committees, and they have undergone diversity training so that we are reaching out into our greater community and recruiting volunteers and a board that reflects cultural diversity and diversity in age, skill set, and gender. All of these changes have been cemented into our policies, our written policies going forward. So these are permanent changes. I think it's important that we view these actions as carefully reasoned steps that translate budget projections into real dollars brought into the Historical Society in the form of revenues, and also that they are reflected in very carefully thought out expenses. So we are, our audit for 2013 confirms that our projections have been accurate. We're on target for 2014. We're in the process right now of writing our budget for 2015. What you see on the screen are the budget projections we gave you in September. We continue to grow our sources for earned income and for sponsorships and for donations while holding flat our request to you for financial support at $75,000. What we're trying to do is realign where our revenues come from, and then building our expenses in a reasoned way so that we can get somewhere close to the budget we had before the economy collapsed in 2008. Right now, we are still operating at a very significantly reduced annual budget. In closing, we think that the city is getting a very good return on its investment, and we deeply appreciate your investment. The Troy Historical Society is now providing you with professional management for your resources, the land, the buildings, and the collections. We are putting a great deal of emphasis into building community engagement, into creating more activated programs that bring in different groups of people, different stakeholders, so that we are fulfilling our vision to preserve and provide access to your heritage, to educate the public in ways beyond school group programming, to activate the community and be part of community development, and then finally be part of economic development for your community, for the city of Troy, because we feel we are an incredible cultural resource. So I thank you for your investment and for maintaining the $75,000 over core costs. Any questions?
Questions from the council?
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, you can use this.
Gert can show you.
She doesn't know the code.
Oh,
okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Lacosi. I'm the acting president of the Troy Nature Society. Thank you for having us here. I know it's late. I'll try to be really brief with my comments. We are a growing organization and not a mature organization. We were founded in 2011, so we're about 3 years old. I'd like to thank the City of Troy and City Council for supporting us last year with a $50,000 in support. Our issues are public awareness and access to the Nature Center facility. With your $50,000, we added a second full-time naturalist. We expanded the building hours to 5 days a week. We increased our executive director, who was at half-time, to full-time, and this is all within the last fiscal year. Developed new school and public programs, and we've increased the number of residents served by 60% in the March 2013 to March 2014 time period. So, Carla, what were the exact numbers? Do you have them off the top of your head?
Over 15,000.
Yeah. So this is from a Nature Center facility that was closed in 2010 to where it is today. So thank you again for your support. In 2014, we had a very aggressive budget for donations and grants, which have not proven to come to fruition. I think we're finding that we are a new organization. We needed things like 2 years of audited financial statements and $100,000 in annual budgeted revenues to really be taken seriously by foundations and funders that we're going to solicit donations. In response to the budgeted shortfall in donations and grants, we have taken a step back. We've gone from 3.5 FTE to 2.85. We've put our executive director effectively back on half-time, and we've cut a program aide from half-time to quarter-time. We're struggling to maintain the building access hours and the quality programming that the citizens of Troy have come to expect from the Nature Center. We're struggling. There's a snapshot of the last couple of fiscal years, our amended budget for June of 14, and then our proposed budget for June of 15, which shows an ask for the city for $75,000. That effectively makes up for our donations and grant shortfall and brings us back to what we think is a fully staffed model of 1 executive director and 2 naturalists. And I think I covered all those points. Again, our issues are public awareness and keeping the facility open. And that's one of our major goals of why we're coming into the city and asking for your continued support. Question?
Questions from council? Brian, these are recommendations from staff after putting this together, or is this a presentation to council?
I'm sorry?
Are these recommendations from staff?
Our recommendation was 75 and 50, which was the status quo. So if the council elects to change to this number of 75, we would have to increase $25,000 in this area.
Councilman Anderson, or Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
The increase that you're asking for, you know, we, I guess the question would be, in your staffing for finding more sources of donations, will that be addressed with an addition, or?
That's our executive director's #1 goal is fundraising, and she's working half-time. So it's difficult to get traction in fundraising with an executive director at half-time.
Okay, would the increase provide a full-time situation or not at all?
Yes.
So the increase is putting you back to 2014 staffing levels, that's right?
Mayor? Just a comment, having been on the foundation side to donate to an entity like this, I understand the trauma that you're in, having to, you're sitting with a foundation board, you want to see a proven track record of finances. And so we're tasking this nature center to go out and find funding. And it's as if they're missing one of their arms and maybe part of a leg. And so they're in this vicious cycle. Really solid foundations that are gonna donate to this organization, their auditors are gonna advise them not to donate to something that can't establish. So I just want all of us at this table to understand what that $25,000 means, is the potential for them to fundraise in a meaningful way and in a quicker way. And that allows us to back off eventually, hopefully. I mean, that's the vision, that's the goal, correct?
Yes.
So it sounds like an outlay. And Councilman Fleming would say, what's the return on investment? It's their ability to fundraise from foundations that would support the organization. They need it in order to do it. Because I know foundations won't, it's just a very difficult thing to get money if you can't establish exactly what you're talking about.
I guess the question I would have, and we had this discussion last year relating to the Historical Society as well, and that's, at one point or another, our goal, in addition to your goal, would be to cut back and eliminate that.
No question.
Right. So, but now we're being charged with another $25,000 in addition to what we gave last year, and then, but the Historical Society is only asking for status quo. At what time do you project, and I know that's a tough question to answer, but what time do you project that we could nip that to zero?
If we would have hit our fundraising goal in 14 that we wanted to, we wouldn't have been asking for the additional $25,000. So I look at it hopefully as a one-year thing. And call it a bootstrap kind of a thing, but I think that's really what it is.
Yeah. So we would restore it to 2014. Is there a different plan? I mean, of how you would raise that money? I mean, I guess that's kind of it didn't work the last time. Was that just because of the time frame, or, I mean, I'm just, give me something to grab on here.
Fair question, yeah. I mean, I think we are an immature organization. We don't have things like 2 years of audited financial statements is something that we needed. We have that now.
I don't want to speak for the entire council, but in 2011, when we said go out and self-fund yourself, that was easy to say to both organizations at the time, because we didn't know. We thought that fundraising would be somewhat easier than it was. And I think what's happened here is that in today's world, everybody's asking for money now. A lot of organizations are now having to do things that they didn't have to do before, because organizations, businesses were very generous with their donations. Now you see the world we live in, the first thing that the corporations and the businesses do is they stop donating money because they have their own issues. So it's different today than it was 3 years ago when we said go out and stand on your own 2 feet. So I understand that. We're not talking about a lot of money here in the big scheme of things. But I think what I hear from council is that we like to see strategic plans. We like to see plans that we're going to be getting to a goal of being able to stand on our own 2 feet. And sometimes I think we set the goal too high. We set the standard 3 years ago a little bit too high. So, I mean, I'm willing to keep this going, but I think at some point we ask the Historical Society for a strategic plan. I think maybe that's what council's asking. I can speak for some of the council members that we've probably participated in functions at both of these great organizations more this year than we ever had you're trying to reach out and do fundraising, I think I've been to 3 or 4 this year and the past couple of years, but I think what you're asking for is a little more time to put together a plan to try and get this done, and I think we're just seeing that it's more difficult than we thought it was gonna be, is what's happening. So I think we're looking for a pledge, from council that we're gonna continue to work as hard as you can so that you don't have to come here every year and beg us, that's not the way it should be.
And it's not fun.
It's not fun for you, it's not fun for us, because, the last thing we want to see is the historical village or the nature center fail in full. There isn't anybody here that wants to see that, I think. Councilman Fleming.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and you are in a tough spot, but when you look at this, you see that in 2012, your wages and payroll taxes were $36,000. You're projecting $100,000 increase for 2015, take the walk. But your donations and grants that you're projecting really haven't changed. $23,000 in donation and grants in 2012, you're proposing $25,000 for 2015, with a $100,000 increase in your wages and payroll taxes. So it looks as if you're putting the money into wages and payroll, but it's not coming in donations and grants. I mean, I think that putting that much more money in wages and payroll, that the emphasis is really going toward getting the donations and grants, you'd see it. I know it's a difficult situation. I agree with everything everybody said, but I think this is the year that really has to happen, because you've got $100,000 more dollars you're spending on wages to get. You're only getting $25,000 in grants. Same thing. You've got $24,000, and you're spending $100,000 less. So that's.
Just one comment to that. I don't want to speak for you, but when I'm looking at your first slide, you did add a second full-time naturalist, which would be in.
Not a fundraising position.
It's not. Yeah, it would not be a fundraising. And
We have our executive director is our fundraiser, but for 4 months of last year, she's been half-time.
I'm just saying, when you go to 100,000 increase, there's programming costs. You also expanded building hours 5 days a week, so there was no fundraising. I think you got to carve this out, is what Councilman Fleming's saying, to really show the direct correlation between donation grants and then fundraising, which did go up, with the wages and payroll, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I think, we're hearing tonight that now that you have 2 years, you feel that your fundraising should increase.
Yes. I would also say we've had a community member donate a market research study to our organization. It's in process right now, which is going to form the basis of, what does the community want? What do they want out of us? What's the feedback from the folks that use us? And that's going to form the basis of what we want to be when we grow up.
Any other questions?
One comment.
Are we allowing more than one speaker on each of these? Just let me.
Let's just keep moving on.
There will be a portion after this for public comment.
We're close to the end here.
And
Troy Community Coalition. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Brian, just for a clarification, are you looking for some direction on this?
We'll have wrap up on the Wednesday night. If you want to give, if there's consensus now, we can take it now.
Well, there's probably half a dozen people here this evening that would love to speak and give some input on what they work so hard for and volunteer their time for. I just think it's incumbent upon us to give them. I don't need it another day or 2 days. I want to give them what they need to keep moving forward. So I'm all for giving 75 to both as a direction. And hopefully having a 2-year opportunity for the Nature Center will allow them to do a better job of fundraising, and it's not easy for them to have to come here every year, so I don't want to make it difficult for them either. So I'm going to propose 75 for each instead of the 75.50. Let's just see what council has to say first. Any other input from council members? Mayor Pro Tem Henderson.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. You know, we've all seen the efforts that go into the Nature Center and the Historical Society. I guess to piggyback off Councilman Fleming's comments, it'd be nice to see that there's a direct correlation between what we contribute $50,000 or $75,000 towards is going to go directly towards fundraising efforts.
Well, in my opinion, you're putting staffing back to 2014 with the hopes that that person is going to encourage that. I guess proof will be in the pudding for next year with the 2-year fundraising capability now to make it easier for some donations to come in at this point. So I thought I heard that they think they're going to be able to do better next year with their fundraising. So that's what I heard.
Mayor?
Councilwoman Holder.
I think there's this, sense that there's going to be this business proposal that we can quantify dollar for dollar what we're going to get. It's a nonprofit, and it's fighting to sustain an asset that this entire community benefits from. Whether you go to the Nature Center or not, to be able to say, when you put your home for sale in Troy, that these assets exist, each of us as a property owner benefits. And so the return on investment to me personally as a citizen is that there are these cultural quality of life entities in the community. If we make $75,000 investment in the Nature Center, $75,000 to the Historical Society, there is a qualitative management intuitive payback that comes back that we'll never be able to quantify dollar for dollar. Are we protecting the taxpayers' money? And while it says we make that donation, I think we are, because we've made an investment in these entities over all these years. So, to make, if the goal is to make ourselves feel comfortable that this is a good investment, I guess to look at it and say, let's not. What if we didn't, and we leave them trying to do it on a shoestring? I think we put more at risk, and there's an opportunity cost there. So it's almost like a gut level intuitive thing that says, how do you help two nonprofits go off and conquer and succeed? And I guess I agree with you. I'd like to see it put in the budget to help them both, to have the staff, to do the programming, and to go after the funding. And that's going to pay us a dividend. That's more likely to pay us a dividend than not investing.
I agree. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but I think for the major portion of people, I think we'd like to just wait till Wednesday when we do the wrap up, so people have time to really think about it. I have no problem with it, but I think what everybody's saying is if you give them money, what's the plan to do better next year? And so I think what's Mayor Pro Tem is asking. I think what Councilman Teets is asking too. What's the plan? And I'm sure that maybe there is a plan. Hopefully there is.
Councilman Pennington.
I don't have a problem authorizing $75,000 this year, but with the same onus that we put on the Historical Society last year, is that we need to see results, and so we would need to wouldn't want to come back to the same situation next year and be asking for $25,000 more basically. And we'd like to see self-sustainment. So it kind of like now you're on the clock. Now you have to hopefully make some changes and get some money ponied up.
Well, I think they have to be sitting here knowing that every year they have to come here to justify their existence. That's just the way things are today. It wouldn't be good to come back next year and not have shown that the fundraising is better, I think. I think they would take that away from this evening. Councilman Teese.
We have asked for a business plan in the past. In fact, the Troy Historical Society, they prepared, I think it was a 10-page document. I remember reading it. And I think that would be most beneficial to figure out what things are gonna gin up the fundraising, because the Historical Society has increased their fundraising and things seem to be moving in the right direction, so, the Nature Center, I think, needs some of that self-evaluation right now to figure out what would be the biggest marginal weight, or marginal improvement to their fundraising.
I think that's reasonable to, if you're gonna approve this, to ask for to come back later on to provide a plan. In defense of them, I don't know, I know they lost their director, which I know hurt the organization tremendously. So if there's consensus to approve this and ask for them to bring a plan to us back September, after the summer, would we have consensus for that?
I'd agree with that, but if you go there and you have an opportunity to go to the Nature Center, it is a beautiful facility. It is a jewel. It's a shame. None of us around this table want to see that go away.
No.
We know that. I think all we're asking is just get a plan. What we also need to remember, the city's already putting an additional like $35,000 in there for maintenance and repairs and utilities and so forth. We're also putting an extra amount there to maintain the Troy Historical Village, we got that. So we have an investment. If you did nothing, the city's going to be spending money to maintain buildings and utilities and so forth anyway. Ongoing expense. But I think that's a good fair assessment that we're going to need to have a little better plan, a little more teeth into it to go forward.
Mayor, could I just clarify something? We do adopt a 3-year budget.
Yes.
So are we suggesting this is 75, 70 for 1 year? Only for both groups? Or what's the?
I think 1 year,
I think
let's see your plan.
75 for 1 year, and let's see the plan in September, continuation with the historical village.
Then historical
And
village is 3 year?
And do the 50 for the other, no increase.
For the Nature Center for years 2 and 3?
Correct.
Yes.
So 75, 75, 75, 75, 50, 50.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we're saying to the executive director, you have job security for a year.
Well, we want to see the plan. We can always adjust this. Okay? We
Gotcha.
can always adjust this. Right.
But there's at least a floor
Yes.
for them. That's probably, it could be a bad, but considering what's going on, I would just like to say, we've only recommended investments in 4 groups who all have a stake in our assets
Yes.
or in our departmental functions, nobody else. So I would say that for all 4 nonprofit groups, when I considered it, that was the philosophy I was coming from. There are a significant number of City of Troy assets.
Yes.
Or departmental uses of the services of the other 2 groups that we have we actually, this idea of a race to zero kind of confuses me because we have a stake in this. We say we want partnerships with the road committee. We want all these partnerships and all this collaboration, but we have a stake in all 4 groups that are coming before us tonight. That's what staff's thinking was, just for what it's
There's no
worth.
question that staff's recommendation was 50, 50, 50. Then there was a 75 request
Yep.
this evening.
Yeah.
Okay. Hate to follow that with the Troy Community Coalition. Oh,
Just one more comment. It's awful difficult when you have not a budget surplus, and we do have more money, and so it's tough to say no with things that are depreciating assets that you don't maintain, so. Just like to see a plan.
I think it's too much to ask for the plan. Well, Nancy, I'm sorry to have you sit over there in the corner for.
Oh, Nancy's right there.
She was ready to roll.
Oh, you're over there.
She was ready to roll.
Bestow upon you the, my clicker here, the power.
Keeps it all moving.
You all know Nancy Morrison. Nancy Morrison is the executive director of the Detroit Community Coalition. I've been very involved with the Detroit Community Coalition. The police department is very involved with the Detroit Community Coalition. We are great partners with them. And Nancy can speak very eloquently about what she's going to present now. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Chief Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Slater and council members. The Detroit Community Coalition has been in existence for over 23 years. The coalition is viewed as an organization that contributes to the quality of life in Troy. We are a data-driven organization, so we look at our local data, like from the schools, which is the MyPi, Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth. We utilize hospital data and police data, and that's how we create our strategic plan. And with that strategic plan, we also incorporate what we will need to address related to the current drug trends. As some of you may remember, back in 2012, K2 Spice was a very big issue here in Troy. The coalition was leading the forefront in that, and we were educating people on K2 and Spice before it became a major issue. And then once we realized it was in the stores in Troy, with the guidance from the police department, the coalition was out visiting the retailers and educating them on the dangers of the K2 and Spice. Some of these retailers were willing to remove it from their shelves, and some of them told us point blank that they were making too much money and they would not do that. So we, of course, worked with our DEA agents and, of course, our legislators, and we were able to get it banned in July of 2012. The next issue that kind of came out of the blue was the hookah. Oh, sorry, gotta keep going. Other right.
Turn right.
Okay, that's not what he said. Okay, right.
Can you just sign?
Oh, you're not. I am ready to move on. Okay. Right, saying, go back, yeah. All right, so the hookah was the next issue, and we worked with our city attorney and then also Beaumont Hospital to educate the public on the hookah and the dangers of the hookah. Chief Mayor mentioned heroin is a up-and-coming issue, and we realize that a lot of people are abusing prescription drugs first, which contain the opiates, and then once they can no longer get the prescriptions or they find out that heroin is cheaper, they move on to heroin. So our town hall is going to be May 14th, and that's going to be on prescription drugs and how our youth are becoming heroin addicts. May 14th, 7 o'clock in the council chambers. I also serve on the Michigan Alcohol Policy Steering Committee, and we look at House bills and Senate bills regarding alcohol. I'm in contact with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, and so I advocate for sound public policy. Now I'm ready. Okay. So we've created a Choose Wisely program back in 1999 with the Detroit Police Department, so we have partnered a lot. So we've been doing this together for 15 years, and this presentation is for 4th grade students, and we teach them about responsible decision-making and also behavior. We save the police department many man-hours because we utilize a coalition staff person instead of 2 police officers to present. We reach over 1,000 students each school year, and since we've been doing it for 15 years, we have reached over 15,000 students. The summer camp. This camp was created over 20 years ago, and it started because the police department was getting calls regarding juvenile delinquent behavior and surges in crime as soon as summer was let out. So we partnered with the police department to put on this summer camp,
In the beginning days, it was held at an apartment complex, and that's where a lot of the calls were coming from. And we had moved it to Smith Middle School. And we found out that the principal said that he saw such a huge and positive difference in his students after they attended our summer camp and returned to school in the fall. So it was a win-win situation. And of course, this program, the summer camp, addresses the unsupervised youth. We provide substance abuse prevention education, healthy lifestyle opportunities, recreational activities, and of course, a safe environment. And of course, we have gotten positive feedback from the parents as well. We do target specific areas of Troy, and these can be characterized as single-parent households, families at very low economic levels, and of course, dysfunctional families as well, which often involve substance abuse. And again, we offer this camp because a lot of times these kids would spend their summer locked in their apartment, playing video games, watching TV, and getting into trouble. So again, we are saving the police department money because the coalition is in charge of the summer camp. The next one is Teens Taking Action. This was a youth group that the coalition started back in 1998. We realized we have to involve all sectors of our community and utilize multiple strategies, just not one strategy, but multiple strategies. So the Teens Taking Action group is involved with our tobacco inspections. And the goal, of course, with our tobacco inspections is to reduce the number of illegal tobacco purchases by minors. So the teens assist with these yearly checks. The next item that the teens are associated with is Project Sticker Shock. I know some of you are familiar with this program because I have attended the liquor violation hearings. And I am in touch with some of these retailers, and they allow us to come into their store and put these bright orange stickers on it. And the stickers, of course, talk about providing alcohol to minors and the consequences of doing such a thing. So Teens Taking Action members with an adult chaperone will go to the stores. And I have heard back from some of the individuals who have had liquor violations. And they have even called my office for more stickers, because once they run out, they will put them on themselves. I've also heard from other store managers that putting these bright orange stickers on really does decrease their alcohol sales. And then we also provide training for our teens. And this training, I consider it it's a therapeutic training, it's a prevention training, it's a leadership training, it's an educational training, so that we can provide these teens with tools and techniques that they can take with them into their adult life. Now, we realize that the average person who has a medical marijuana card is the 32-year-old white male with a history of substance abuse. And I'm assuming these white males do not know how to deal with stressors, life issues, or anything else. They are stuffing their feelings, their emotions, and all the pain, where we will provide these teens with this opportunity so that they know how to deal with things that arise in life. I also have, the coalition has trained an individual in tips, and I'm in close contact with that individual. I know at the last liquor violation hearing, I was able to connect the two, and then she keeps me informed whether the training has been scheduled or not. So the coalition is an excellent bang for your buck, and we help the coalition, the PD, save numerous funds. Are there any questions?
Questions? Councilman Fleming?
How much you're asking for the city?
25,000.
25.
Councilman T.
Before tomorrow's meeting, can you send copies of your budget and so forth? I don't, unless I missed that some, okay, yeah.
Copies of the coalition's budget?
Right. I mean, I think we asked that from all the groups, and sure makes sense. I'm sure it's being spent wisely and so forth,
Sure.
Couple of comments. think the police department used to give $100,000 to the coalition back.
Yes.
Did it stop 5 years ago, 2005? Or it was cut in half in
2009.
2009?
And I
I
just
certainly
wanted
don't
to,
want to speak for the chief, but I think you can.
I did want to add that, you know, we had a big federal grant for 10 years, and part of the requirements was that we had matching funds.
Yes.
And we did have the matching funds, so we could sustain ourselves. And then, of course, the economy tanked, and then the grant sunsetted. So we knew, we were thinking we were going to be in good shape, but then the city took back the funds as well.
As a board member on the coalition, we are constantly looking at our expenses and costs. We're constantly striving to keep them all in check. And from the police department perspective, which is what I'm talking about tonight, if we didn't have the coalition, we'd have to assign a police officer to do this. These things have to be done. They're part of our commitment to the community. There's a direct result, as Nancy briefly discussed. We did have problems in apartment complexes. We did realize we could have a strong possibility of gang issues moving into town when we started that one program. We got this going, and we eliminated the gang graffiti and some of the issues that we saw happening there, and that was all in partnership with the coalition. So they run the summer program now. It's a very good investment from the police department's perspective.
Good. Any other questions?
Didn't you also lose some other funding this year from one of the businesses in Toronto?
Oh, yes, we did. Our contact from Meritor and that whole department was eliminated.
Just a comment. This winter, I took the Citizens Police Academy course, and organically, numerous times in the presentations that officers gave during that course, during the courses, they referenced Troy Youth Assistance and the Troy Community Coalition as partnering organizations. So there is clearly a solid reputation that leads into our safe city status. This is part of that proactive community piece. And it really was pronounced to me during that academy because it was just all different people who would randomly bring it up as they were answering questions, how they lean on the coalition. And I just wanted to mention that to you. I don't know if you realize how appreciated you are by a number of people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
I'd like to introduce from Troy Youth Assistance, Lynette Sepulowski. She's the past chair of the board. Come on up, Lynette. And I reached out to get a direct user from the police department who uses Troy Youth Assistance on a regular basis. And the best person to do that is Police Officer Christy Schuler. She's assigned to our investigations. She deals with the Troy Youth Assistance on a regular basis, and as you may all remember, Christy was recognized as Police Officer of the Year this year for her work in crimes against children, some very vicious crimes. We're proud to have Christy represent us here tonight.
Not only is Chrissy, not only does she work with Troy Youth Assistance, but she's also the vice chair of Troy Youth Assistance. So I wanted to say that. You are all familiar with Troy Youth Assistance. We appear before you. We've brought you a brochure. You've seen our annual report for the last couple of years. Just as a point of information, I want to remind you that when Youth Assistance in Oakland County was established in the 1950s, the idea was that it would be a tri-sponsorship of three groups. One is the Oakland County Court Family Division, second is the local school district, and third is the municipality. So we are very fortunate to have our caseworker, a full-time caseworker. There are 26 Oakland County Youth Assistance offices in, what time is it? Jeez, yeah. There are 26 youth assistance offices in Oakland County. And they are all attached to their municipalities and their school districts. And some have full-time caseworkers, and many do not. And we are very fortunate in Troy to have a full-time caseworker. So her salary and her benefits are all paid for by Oakland County Youth Assistance. That is not a cost that comes to us locally. The Troy School District provides us our office space, and our office space is beautiful in their service center. And there are many of the youth assistance offices that have nothing more than closets and small little rooms that nobody else is bothering to use. It's been 5 years, unfortunately, since the city of Troy has been able to fund Oakland County Troy Youth Assistance. 6-7 years ago, we were funded $35,000 a year, and then we dropped to $17,500 a year, and then in 2009, we lost all of our funding. So we managed to kick ourselves into fundraising mode. We had absolutely no experience with that, but we did. We learned how to fundraise, and we have we just had the drawing for a raffle last week, Dollars for Education. We have lived very responsibly. We cut a full-time office staff person from full-time to 20 hours a week to 9 hours a week. And so now we cover the office with volunteers when there isn't a secretary, a paid secretary on duty. So we are trying to be very fiscally responsible in terms of the kinds of things that we do in our office. We have the reputation in Troy. Our family education committee has the strongest reputation in Oakland County for family education programs. We're proud to say that we are probably the only organization in Troy that provides parenting programs, not only for parents, but for parents and their children. We do a Sex Can Wait program that really focuses on that whole idea of waiting before having sex, and it focuses on STDs rather than on pregnancy. We do a very successful program on smartphones, because what we have found lately, and the way that we come up with our programs is we listen to what the parents in our office are coming up and talking to our caseworker about. We're listening to the cases that the police department is bringing us and saying to us, these things are really out there right now, and then we focus on finding somebody who will present a program. Our presenters are almost all volunteers. Several years ago, we brought a high-profile national speaker in, but we haven't been able to afford to do anything like that in the last couple of years because of our lack of funding. We provide scholarship opportunities for financially qualified youth in an affluent community like Troy. And in this affluent community of Troy, 15% of the children who attend Troy public schools receive free lunches. So that should say a great deal to all of us about who our neighbors are in different neighborhoods in the community. Our TYA mission statement makes a direct reference to preventing and reducing juvenile delinquency. And I would just like to read and make a reference to some research that was conducted by the Washington State Institute for Public Policy. And it was about general cost benefits of community-based programs. And this is what they say. They say that delinquency prevention programs can save taxpayers $7 to $10 for every $1 invested. They say that community-based alternatives achieved a positive return on investment and significantly reduced recidivism. They said that doubling current investments in high-quality programming could eliminate the need for additional adult prison capacity in the future. They say they estimate that the present value of saving a 14-year-old high-risk juvenile from a life of crime ranges from $2.6 to $5.2 million. And saving a high-risk youth at birth would save society between $2.6 and $4.4 million. Our caseworker is seeing students now in the kindergarten, 5 years old, beginning to work with those children. I also have some information, and I'm not going to go through this, but I will get this to Brian to pass around if anybody would take a look at it. It's information that TY has already shared with Chief Mayor, and it's regarding the value of family-focused counseling services with the YA caseworker for 4 months versus a youngster going into Children's Village, being put on probation, things of that sort. So I thank you for your time.
What are you asking for?
Oh, I'm sorry, we are asking for $10,000.
And as Leonette mentioned, one of our main goals is to curb juvenile delinquency. From the police department, I investigate many of the cases where juveniles are suspects as well. Approximately 40 cases a year we divert through Troy Youth Assistance, where they do direct work one-on-one with a caseworker instead of going through the criminal justice system. That also saves the police department money. We're not sending officers to court, we're not paying overtime for court, and the caseworker will handle these cases one-on-one with the families. Also, we get calls all the time that parents are having problems with their juveniles at home, home incorrigibility, school incorrigibility. Sometimes they might suspect that there's drugs or alcohol being used, and we will refer them to Troy Youth Assistance. It gives them a great resource to reach out to. And then just this school year alone, Youth Assistance has interacted with over 50 Troy families, and I want to say it's even higher than that through the Youth Recognition Program, Youth Involvement, Character Building Programs, events, and some of the family ed programs that we offer. And then the funds that are being requested are not provided by the county or the school district and will allow Troy Youth Assistance to continue. And in the long run, that will save the city money, especially the police department. We use this program all the time. Today alone, I referred 2 different cases from shoplifting cases over the weekend to Troy Youth Assistance. And we use this program for when kids make a mistake, when they get in trouble the first time, and kind of try to get them back on the right track and avoid them going into the criminal justice system, avoid them having a blemish on their record, preventing them from getting into college and things like that. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Henderson.
Just a comment, I know there are a lot of parents out there that wish they had this kind of assistance when their kids were growing up. And there is no doubt that the families and kids are an appreciating asset in Troy. And I'm all in support of it, especially since it's in the police budget so nicely. So thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for keeping it at 2 hours, Brian.
Yeah, nice going. This is how the budget's gonna be.
It was 2 hours at a time. 2 hours break, 2 hours.
It was nice.
No, it was good.
Did you want to create consensus on the last 2?
Unless Councilman Teets wants to see a budget before.
I mean, just to email it to us, I think we should have the same standard for each of the groups,
Do you
don't
want to
you?
okay and get it, or do you want to wait, just consensus on both these items and then ask for a budget?
I think in good faith, I give consensus.
Okay, absolutely.
But both groups submit their budget, and we'll email it out.
TYA gives us an annual report every year. Sounds like we have consensus on all pass-throughs this evening. For those that are here, consensus on all pass-throughs this evening, Council. So that concludes our discussion item. Just to let everyone know that you can go online. When do you think the budget might be available online?
The budget itself, or the presentation?
Presentation.
Presentations will be on tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
From tonight's.
Our next item of business is public comment. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to speak?
I just wanted
Roger,
to.
if you could just come to the
Microphone?
Microphone.
I just wanted to point out that as far as the value and the return of your 50,000 last year and your 75,000 this year, 4 years ago, in 2009, the city allocated something over $400,000 for the operation and maintenance of the Stage Nature facility. Today, for $75,000, we are at a level where we are providing the same level of service and programming and maintenance of the trails and facilities that used to cost you $400,000 plus. So I think, in my mind, that's a heck of a bargain, and you're to be commended for making that kind of an opportunity available and keeping that facility available for residents at that minimum cost. We see it as a partnership. We urge you to see it as a partnership and not as a thing that we have to come and ask for every year for a donation. We're partners. We're managing your facility for a lot less than you used to have to pay to manage it. So this is a good thing that came out of the financial difficulties of 2009. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Thank you. It's a great presentation, Brian. I think a lot of hard work went into putting this together. Unless you've been here to see how staff really has to work to get this together for an evening like this, it's incredible. But thanks for that, and thanks to staff. Thanks to the public for being here and putting up with us this evening. So we're adjourned.